Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Padgett. Jessica was born on December 15, 1980, in Pennsylvania, where she spent her entire life. As a child, she was energetic and cheerful. However, her parents, Thomas and Danelle, divorced when she was young. Her mother later remarried, and Jessica formed a close bond with her stepfather, whom she considered her second father. After graduating from high school in 1998, Jessica attended college to study preschool education. It was during this time that she met her future husband, Michael Padgett. They began dating, moved in together, and had 2 children over the course of their 8-year relationship. Although they didn't get married until August 2014, Michael was a caring father and husband. However, like any family, they experienced ups and downs in their relationship. Jessica was happy with Michael, but just 4 months after their wedding, she vanished. Before her disappearance, Jessica worked at a kindergarten in Northampton for 2 years. She loved her job, as she was passionate about working with children and had a natural ability to connect with them. The children adored her, and she enjoyed spending time with them. On November 21, 2014, Jessica dropped off her older children at school and then headed to work with her younger son, who attended the same kindergarten. It was a typical day, with no indication of the trouble that was to come. Jessica asked her administrator if she could take a short break from work to send a fax to her mother's house in a rural area near Northampton. The administrator agreed, and Jessica left her son at kindergarten before driving to her mother's house. She was expected to return to work within 30 minutes, but an hour passed and she didn't come back. Her colleagues tried calling her, but she didn't answer. When Jessica failed to return, the kindergarten administrator contacted her husband, Michael, to ask if he knew where she was. Michael said he was at work and hadn't heard from her. He tried calling her, but all his calls went straight to voicemail, which was unusual for Jessica as she always answered calls from her family. Michael then called his mother-in-law, Danelle, who was in Florida, to see if Jessica had contacted her. However, Danelle hadn't heard from her daughter all day and was immediately worried. She suggested that Michael call her husband, Greg, who was Jessica's stepfather, to see if he had any information. However, Greg reported that he hadn't seen or spoken to Jessica that day. As the minutes ticked by, Jessica's relatives grew increasingly worried. After numerous failed attempts to contact her, Danelle took a flight to Pennsylvania to search for her daughter. Meanwhile, for hours after Jessica disappeared from work, her husband Michael reported her missing to the police. He expressed his concern that Jessica would never leave their children voluntarily, leading him to fear the worst. The police promptly launched an investigation, distributing Jessica's description to all nearby stations. She was described as 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighing 130 pounds, with a footprint tattoo on her shoulder, brown hair, and hazel eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing gray sweatpants and a black hoodie with the words "Duck, Duck, Goose" on the front and "Staff" on the back. A thorough search of local hospitals and morgues yielded no results. Detectives worked to determine Jessica's whereabouts, interviewing her co-workers in the process. However, everyone they spoke to reported that Jessica had no enemies and was well liked by her colleagues, children, and their parents. According to her co-workers, Jessica seemed fine when she left work at lunchtime, and they noticed nothing unusual about her behavior. 2 hours after Michael reported his wife Jessica missing, the police were able to locate her phone's signal, which indicated that it was approximately 1 mile from the kindergarten where she worked. Although the data was not entirely accurate due to inherent location determination errors, it provided a general area for the police to focus their search. However, by the time they began searching, it was already nighttime. The police found Jessica's car, a white Subaru Outback, in a nearby parking lot. The vehicle was unlocked and empty, with her purse, documents, and bank cards still inside. The keys were in the ignition, and her phone was on the passenger seat next to her purse. There were no signs of a crime in the car, leaving the police with several unanswered questions. Where was Jessica, and what had caused her to abandon her car and valuables so close to her workplace? To answer these questions, the police sought CCTV footage. A camera on the back wall of a store across the street had captured the area where Jessica's car was found. After reviewing the footage with the store manager, the police saw Jessica driving into the parking lot at around 1 p.m. She got out of the car and stood by the driver's door for a short time before leaving and not returning. The investigators were baffled by Jessica's disappearance, as she had left behind her documents, phone, and keys. It was unclear whether she had intentionally gone into hiding. Surveillance footage showed Jessica walking between two buildings towards another parking lot, where she vanished from view due to the lack of cameras. To get a better look at the footage, the investigators made a copy of the video to review on a larger screen at the police station. The Northampton Police Department, being a small force, enlisted the help of the Pennsylvania State Police to coordinate a search effort. Flyers with Jessica's photo were distributed throughout Northampton and surrounding cities, as well as shared on social media and through local news outlets. State police detectives began reconstructing the events leading up to Jessica's disappearance. They started by re-interviewing the kindergarten staff, who revealed that Jessica had left work to send a fax from her mother's house. The detectives then visited the house, which was approximately 4 miles from the kindergarten, in search of answers. The detectives met with Danelle and her husband Greg at the scene and learned that Jessica had keys to their home and could visit at any time. On the day of her disappearance, both Danelle and Greg had been out, Danelle in Florida and Greg elsewhere, which left uncertainty about Jessica's activities at the house. They also checked Greg's fax machine for records of usage, but found that the device was faulty, which didn't provide any clear information. Jessica might have used another fax machine, but it still didn't explain why she had left her belongings in her car. The detectives decided to speak with Jessica's husband Michael, as husbands are often suspects in such cases. To confirm Michael's story that he was the first to leave the house on the day Jessica disappeared, detectives investigated his claim. It was a possibility they couldn't rule out, as statistically, a significant number of disappearances involve a partner. As they continued the investigation, the police arranged a search party, and local media alerted the public about Jessica's disappearance. Anyone with information was asked to come forward. By this point, 48 hours had passed, but no new leads emerged on Jessica's journey to her mother's house. To aid in their investigation, detectives scoured the route to her mother's house for surveillance cameras. One key location, an Exxon gas station adjacent to the main road leading to the mother's residence, had multiple cameras installed. Given the fact that this gas station was strategically situated on Jessica's stated route, the police logically inferred that if Jessica drove in the direction she said, she would be captured on camera. A review of the recording showed that her car was, indeed, captured driving by at approximately 12:56 p.m. From there, the journey to her mother's house took just a few minutes, suggesting Jessica would need to make the short trip back in order to utilize a functional fax machine, which wasn't operational at her mother's home. While fast-forwarding the tape to find a shot of the vehicle's potential return, detectives made a perplexing observation. The footage shows Jessica's white car speeding through a gas station just 14 minutes later. Notably, the car took a peculiar route, turning towards the gas station and continuing onto the other side without stopping, before heading towards the city center, where the car was later abandoned in a parking lot. Given her rapid pace, the likely reason for this unusual detour was a red traffic light at the intersection, which Jessica may have attempted to avoid by cutting through the gas station. From there, she drove onto a different road where the light was green and eventually left her car in the parking lot, where a police officer discovered it later. However, a surprising detail emerged upon closer inspection of the footage. Jessica, who was 5 feet 4 inches tall and 130 pounds, appeared to be much shorter and lighter than the person seen exiting her car. Measuring against the known height of the car, experts estimated that this person stood between 5 feet 11 inches and 6 feet 3 inches tall. Moreover, during their examination of the abandoned car, the police noticed that the driver's seat was pushed forward, which would make it uncomfortable for someone taller than 5 feet 11 inches to operate the vehicle comfortably. The police initially found it suspicious that the driver's seat was positioned for someone of Jessica's height. However, after reviewing the footage, they discovered that the person who got out of the car had adjusted the seat to its most forward position, attempting to make it seem like Jessica was driving. But this raised another question: who was the tall person seen in the footage? Michael. He stood at around 6 feet tall. The police brought him in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance, claiming he was at work when the kindergarten staff called him. Detectives verified his alibi by interviewing his colleagues and tracking the geolocation of his phone on the day of Jessica's disappearance. The evidence confirmed that Michael was indeed at work at the time, which meant the person in the footage was not him. For days had passed since Jessica's disappearance, and her children were struggling to cope with the stress and uncertainty. Despite the ongoing search efforts, no leads had been found. Investigators re-examined the footage of someone exiting Jessica's car, but the person's identity remained a mystery. However, upon closer inspection, the officers noticed a detail they had previously missed. A minute after the unknown person disappeared from view, a white SUV, likely a Ford, left the scene. This new information led the police to Greg, Jessica's stepfather, who matched the suspect's height description and owned a similar vehicle. The police requested that Greg come to the station for questioning, leaving him shocked and dismayed to be considered a suspect in his stepdaughter's disappearance. Greg claimed that he had left his car at a service center for repairs and that a neighbor had given him a ride there to pick it up. He then stated that he had stopped at an Exxon gas station to grab a bite to eat. However, the police obtained CCTV footage from the gas station, which showed Greg driving past the station just 2 minutes after leaving the service center. It turned out that Greg had lied about stopping at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Greg's entire story was fabricated. His neighbor denied driving him to the service center, contradicting Greg's claim. This led detectives to suspect that Greg might have been involved in Jessica's disappearance. By piecing together the evidence, investigators concluded that Greg was likely at home when Jessica arrived. It's possible that something happened, and Greg drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center. The police searched Greg's house, where they found evidence that contradicted his alibi. The fax machine, which Greg claimed was not working, was found to be functional, and its usage history showed that Jessica had indeed sent a fax from the house on the day of her disappearance. Furthermore, a trash can in the basement contained napkins with bloodstains, and Greg's shoes, which were found in a dumpster on the street, had dried blood on them. Donnell reported to the police that Greg had requested an early trash pickup the day before, which seemed unusual at the time, especially since the trash can wasn't full. In hindsight, this could be how Greg disposed of evidence related to cleaning products and rags used in the house. During a second interrogation, the police confronted Greg, stating that they knew his previous statements were false and that they had found evidence in his home. They also informed him that they were aware Jessica had been at his house on the day she disappeared. Greg then began to talk. Greg claimed that when he returned home on the afternoon of November 21st, he found Jessica's car in the driveway and bloodstains on the carpet. He alleged that Jessica was already dead when he arrived and that he panicked, fearing no one would believe him. He supposedly drove Jessica's car to a city center parking lot and then returned home. Greg also stated that Jessica had outstanding debts, which he claimed led to her death. However, detectives later discovered that this was another lie, and they found evidence that Greg had purchased adult toys the day before Jessica disappeared. The investigators were fed up with Greg's inconsistent stories, so they directly asked him where he had hidden his stepdaughter Jessica's body, explaining that an autopsy would provide answers to many questions. Realizing he was caught, Greg changed his story again. This time, he claimed he was at home watching adult videos when Jessica arrived and asked to send a fax. According to Greg, he was standing behind her as she used the computer, and he became aroused and developed a desire for his stepdaughter. Without saying a word, he allegedly pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head. Then, he moved Jessica's body to the bedroom. Greg then drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center, where he had previously left his Ford for repairs. To mislead investigators, he adjusted the seat to make it appear as though Jessica was driving. What Greg said next shocked the investigators. After returning home, he set up a video camera near the bed and recorded a video of himself with Jessica's body. The police later found this disturbing video on Greg's computer. Greg confessed to wrapping his stepdaughter Jessica's body in a blanket and hiding it in a ravine near his home. He claimed he was not a bad person, but had lost control. After the crime, Greg's life fell apart. He lost his business, home, dogs, and wife. However, he never mentioned the loss of Jessica. Jessica's mother, Danelle, was shocked to discover that her daughter was dead and that her husband was responsible. The authorities announced Jessica's death, stating that she was a victim of homicide. The district attorney, John Morganelli, expressed skepticism about Greg's version of events, but believed there was a sexual motive behind the crime. The prosecutor's office examined the evidence to determine if Greg had planned the attack. Jessica's family released a statement thanking law enforcement, the media, and the public for their efforts. They described Jessica as a beautiful and vibrant young woman who was loved by her family and friends, and stated that her loss made the world a darker place. Gregory Gregg, 53, was charged with the murder of Jessica Padgett. Initially, investigators suspected that Greg had tried to persuade Jessica into a romantic encounter, but when she refused, he killed her to avoid exposure. However, this theory was difficult to prove due to the lack of defensive wounds on Jessica's body. She died from a single wound to the back of her head, which corroborated Greg's testimony. Under Pennsylvania law, Greg could have faced the death penalty, but since Jessica was already dead when he committed the second part of the crime, the prosecution could not pursue the death penalty. An examination of Greg and Jessica's computers and phones revealed no evidence of a relationship beyond that of stepfather and stepdaughter. The trial began in 2015. District Attorney John Morganelli noted that Greg's lawyer, John McMahon Jr., failed to submit the results of a mental health evaluation for Greg. McMahon claimed that he had Greg evaluated for a possible insanity defense, but the evaluation found that Greg did not have a diminished mental capacity, so McMahon did not use it in the trial. During the trial, the jury was forced to watch a disturbing 6-minute video that Greg had recorded, which showed him committing heinous crimes using adult toys he had purchased the day before. The jury was reluctant to view the video, but the judge ruled that they were obligated to watch it before reaching a verdict. Greg's lawyer argued that the crime was not premeditated and that his client should be charged with a third-degree crime rather than a first-degree crime. In response, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli presented the video as evidence to prove that the crime was, in fact, premeditated. Morganelli explained that this was necessary to convince the jurors of Greg's guilt, despite the disturbing nature of the footage. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict in just 6 minutes, finding Gregory Gregg guilty of taking Jessica's life and desecrating her body. As a result, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When asked by the judge if he had any final words, Greg simply replied, "No, sir. I'm just very sorry." Following the sentencing, the judge advised the jurors to seek counseling from a psychologist to cope with the traumatic case. Jessica's husband, Michael, spoke to reporters, expressing the difficulty of moving on without his beloved wife and raising their 3 children alone. He described Jessica as the most wonderful person he had ever met. In a separate matter, Danelle, Greg's wife, has initiated divorce proceedings. However, the process is proving to be complex and Greg is hindering her efforts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Milleke van Doorn. Milleke grew up in a typical family with her parents and 2 sisters in Zaanstad, a city in North Holland, Netherlands. Milleke was a well-behaved child who stayed out of trouble and was friendly to everyone. Having just graduated from high school with a good reputation, she was looking forward to a bright future. However, her life took a dramatic turn one summer evening. That summer night changed everything for Milleke, and her story became a national sensation. On the evening of Sunday, June 7, 1992, Milleke attended a birthday party for a friend, which was held in an apartment in a local building. The building looked almost the same back then as it does today, except for the taller trees that surround it. Milleke left her birthday celebration early to catch the last bus home, but when she arrived at the bus stop, she realized she had missed it by 30 minutes. Unbeknownst to her, the bus schedule had been adjusted due to the Pentecost holiday. She had another option to get home than taking the train from the station located half a mile away on the same street. However, she never come home. The next morning, the pastor of St. Joseph's Church, which is near the train station, made a disturbing discovery while on his morning walk. He found a body floating in a pond adjacent to the church and immediately called the police at 8:54 a.m. Within minutes, detectives arrived at the scene, and the tragic news was soon delivered to the Van Doorn family, leaving them in a state of shock and grief. Milleke's body was pulled from the water, bearing signs of a violent crime. Injuries on her neck, face, and body, including multiple stab wounds, were evident. She was also found partially undressed. In an attempt to conceal the crime, the perpetrator had covered the body with reeds, but this effort failed, leading to its discovery. The news of Milleke's tragic death was devastating for her family, who had envisioned a bright future for her. The autopsy provided some information about the crime. The presence of semen and pubic hair in Milleke's body suggested a sexual assault. The fact that there was no water in Milleke's lungs indicated that she did not drown in the pond. Instead, she had likely been killed elsewhere, and her body was later hidden in the water in an attempt to disguise the crime. The exact time of Milleke's death remained unclear, with possibilities ranging from immediately after she left a party to several hours later. Milleke's body was found in the water, which made it impossible to determine the time of death by body temperature alone. The pond was where her body was dumped, but it was not the location where she was actually killed. The police were searching for the original crime scene, where they expected to find evidence due to the severity of Milleke's injuries. A key piece of evidence was that one of her shoes was missing, which could potentially lead investigators to both the crime scene and the perpetrator. The police distributed flyers with information about the case, including the fact that one of Milleke's shoes was missing. They asked the public to report if the shoe was found, and eventually, the second shoe was discovered. At the time of the investigation in 1992, DNA research was not advanced, and DNA samples taken from Milleke's body did not provide any useful leads for the detectives. The investigation began with interviews with Milleke's family to determine if she had any conflicts or enemies. However, the family reported that Milleke had no conflicts with anyone and was doing well personally. She had a boyfriend around her age, and they rarely fought. After learning that Milleke attended a birthday party on the night she died, investigators spoke to all the guests, including her boyfriend. However, numerous interviews did not produce any leads, and everyone reported the same story that Milleke had left the party just before midnight and planned to take a bus to her neighborhood. Unfortunately, none of Milika's friends were aware that the last bus had already departed by the time she reached the bus stop. In 1992, mobile phones were not widespread, making it difficult for investigators to determine if Milika had boarded the bus or reached her destination safely. After ruling out her friends as suspects, the police began searching for witnesses who may have seen or heard something on the night of the crime. They conducted door-to-door interviews with residents in the area where Milika's body was found, gathering a significant amount of information, but few specific details. Several witnesses reported hearing a woman scream briefly at night, but it was not alarming enough to prompt them to take action. Others claimed to have seen a man of Turkish appearance riding a bicycle towards the location where Milika's body was discovered. As a result, investigators shifted their focus to the Turkish community living in the Kogerveld neighborhood. Some young men from the Turkish community had previous run-ins with the law, drawing the attention of investigators. However, despite months of inquiry, the police were unable to identify a suspect. The men they questioned denied being near the pond on the night of the crime, leading to a stalemate in the investigation. 6 months after Milika van Doorn's murder, a significant discovery was made when a roofer working on the roof of St. Joseph's Church found one of Milika's shoes. This shoe had been on the roof the entire time, but it was unclear how it got there since the only way to access the roof was by ladder. The conclusion was that the perpetrator must have deliberately thrown the shoe onto the roof while at the pond, but the reasoning behind this action remains a mystery. Unfortunately, any potential evidence that may have been left on the roof was erased by harsh weather conditions over time. Years went by, and Milika's case remained unsolved, causing immense pain for her parents. Despite the passing of time, the police revisited Milika's case, conducting multiple interviews with local residents in an attempt to uncover new information. Additionally, the case was featured on several television programs, which led to an influx of calls from the public with potential leads. However, none of these efforts resulted in a breakthrough, and the identity of the suspect remains unknown. The authorities had the perpetrator's DNA samples on file, waiting for a breakthrough in testing technology. By analyzing these samples, forensic experts inferred that the perpetrator was likely a male of Turkish origin, residing in the Kogerveld area in 1992, and aged between 16 and 30 years at the time of the crime. To narrow down the search, nearly 200 men from the area voluntarily provided cheek swabs for DNA testing, but unfortunately, this effort did not yield a match. Almost 20 years after Milika's murder, a significant breakthrough occurred in April 2012. The Netherlands amended a law making it possible to conduct DNA kinship testing. By analyzing the autopsy results, evidence, and the perpetrator's behavior, investigators created a psychological profile of the suspect. The profile suggested that the perpetrator was a resentful and frustrated individual, angry at women in general. Milika was likely an accidental victim who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The perpetrator may have had a brief conversation with Milika before attacking her violently and threatening her. After satisfying his urges, he killed her to prevent her from identifying him. For several weeks after the crime, he kept a low profile, possibly pretending to be ill to avoid social interactions and conceal the scratches he sustained during the struggle with Milika. The police profiler described the suspect as a hot-tempered, selfish, and critical individual with few friends, poor relationships with girlfriends, and an inability to handle criticism. Based on this profile, investigators estimated that the perpetrator was between 18 and 25 years old in 1992. In April 2016, investigators reopened the case of Milika van Doorn, which had gone cold for over 20 years. A new lead emerged in June 2016, when a report was filed mentioning the names of 2 Turkish men who had lived in Zandvoort in 1992, around the time of Milika's death. Notably, both men had left the area shortly after the incident. The police aimed to determine if these 2 individuals were connected to the crime. Tracking them down proved challenging, and it took over a year to locate them in Turkey and obtain the necessary DNA samples. Finally, the DNA analysis did not yield a match with the DNA evidence found on Milica's body. In 2017, authorities used DNA typing technology to re-examine the Milica case. As a result, the police contacted 133 men of Turkish origin who lived in the area where the body was found in 1992, asking for voluntary DNA samples to compare to the crime scene DNA. The goal was to analyze the Y chromosome pattern, which is passed from father to son, to identify potential relatives of the perpetrator. The authorities assured the men that their DNA would only be used for this case and would be destroyed afterward. Most of the 133 men agreed to provide a DNA sample, only a few refused. A total of 126 men participated in the study. The police appreciated their cooperation, saying it was a testament to the community's desire for justice. After a month of analysis, the results showed that the DNA of the original perpetrator was not among the samples. However, the DNA of a man who was unknowingly related to the perpetrator was found. On Monday, December 10, 2017, the police arrested the suspect who had evaded capture for 25 years. The man, 47-year-old Hussein, had refused to submit his DNA for verification, but a clever investigation led to his downfall. Since local laws prohibit sharing suspects' personal information, his full identity and photo were not made public. A breakthrough in the case came when investigators cross-checked DNA profiles of relatives, focusing on those who, like Hussein, had refused to provide a sample. Coincidentally, Hussein's brother had willingly provided his DNA to the authorities, unaware of its potential impact on his sibling. This helped the investigators build a list of people connected to Hussein through family ties, ultimately revealing his identity as the suspect who had managed to stay hidden for nearly 2.5 decades. The police obtained a warrant to take a DNA sample from Hussein without his permission. A comparison with the DNA samples from Milica's body showed a perfect match, providing strong evidence against him. As a result, Hussein was formally charged with the crime. During his 2018 trial, Hussein claimed he was not guilty. Initially, he said he was possessed by an evil spirit and couldn't remember the attack. Later, he changed his story, saying he had a secret relationship with Milica, which is why his DNA was found on her body. He claimed he had to keep the relationship a secret because he had recently gotten married. However, the judge didn't believe Hussein's new claim for 2 reasons. Firstly, he only made this statement a year after his arrest, and secondly, no one could confirm that Milica and Hussein even knew each other, let alone had an intimate relationship. Milica's family testified during the trial. Milica's sister spoke directly to the suspect, saying that he had kept silent for years, hadn't cooperated with the police when they asked for a DNA test, and had continued living freely in the neighborhood. She accused him of going on to start a family and have had 4 daughters and called him a monster who had ruined Milica's life. She expressed her disgust that there were men like him who used and exploited women, treated them like trash, and then simply moved on with their lives. The other sister expressed her disappointment and frustration that Hussein had not taken responsibility for his actions or shown remorse. Instead, he had made a surprising claim of a secret relationship with the victim and complained about his own family struggles. She pointed out that Hussein's family could visit him in prison if they wished, but she could only visit her sister's grave. She hoped for justice, believing that her sister deserved it after meeting a terrible end. It was a deeply emotional day for Milica Van Doorn's family. When her father was given the opportunity to speak, he was filled with anger and said that Hussein's silence for 25 years was cowardly. He found Hussein's treatment of Milica to be extremely disturbing and was shocked by the news of her death. On December 11, 2018, Hussein was found guilty of Milica's murder based on DNA evidence. The court determined that the murder was committed to cover up another crime, a sex crime. Hussein was sentenced to 20 years in prison and ordered to pay €10,000 in compensation to Milika's family. Notably, Hussein refused to be present in the courtroom during the sentencing and instead remained in a cell outside. In February 2019, Hussein appealed his 20-year prison sentence and it was reduced to 19 years and 7 months. But finally, he did not get to serve the full reduced term. Hussein was found dead on June 13, 2022. According to his lawyer, he died shortly after exercising despite receiving emergency medical treatment. The attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carrie Leah Farver. Carrie Leah Farver was born on November 30, 1974, in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. As a single mother, she raised her son, Max Maxwell, after experiencing failed relationships in the past. Raising Max was challenging for Carrie. Despite her immense love for her child, she struggled with depression, which led to a period where she spent a month in bed. During this time, her mother, Nancy Rainey, took care of Max. Carrie's difficult relationship with Max's father and unstable living conditions contributed to her mental health issues. At the age of 20, Carrie's struggles led to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. This condition causes extreme mood swings, ranging from euphoria, increased productivity, and excessive friendliness to depression, bitterness, and feelings of powerlessness. Although bipolar disorder significantly complicates daily life, Carrie's doctor found an effective treatment for her in the early 2000s. With this treatment, Carrie was able to manage her condition and live a relatively normal life. Whether Carrie wanted to settle her personal life is an open question. On one hand, what woman doesn't dream of a suitable partner? On the other hand, why commit to someone who might bring worries and misfortunes? Carrie was raised in a loving family and had an active lifestyle. She played sports and aspired to become a doctor. However, her dreams were cut short during her first medical practice when she fainted at the sight of blood. Deciding not to risk her health or her patients, she pursued a career in programming instead. In the fall of 2012, Carrie received a job offer in Omaha with good prospects and decided to take it. However, her son Max was in middle school and preferred to stay in his familiar surroundings, so he remained with his grandmother in Macedonia. According to Amy, a friend of Carrie's father, Carrie had a radiant smile that drew attention whenever she entered a room. It was likely this quality that caught Dave Kropa's eye when they met at an auto repair shop in November 2012. As Carrie showed him something inside her car, a Ford Explorer, Dave felt an instant attraction. Their first date arrived soon after, but their time together was interrupted by numerous calls and messages from a woman named Liz, who eventually stopped by Dave's apartment to collect something she had left there earlier. Dave told Carrie about his past relationship with Liz, whom he met on a dating site 6 months prior. They had been together for a while, but he ended things because she was extremely clingy. Carrie was understanding and wasn't fazed by Liz's presence in Dave's apartment, recognizing that everyone has past relationships that can resurface. 2 weeks after moving in, Carrie started dating Dave. They had discussed their expectations beforehand and agreed to a brief, casual affair. Liz, whose full name is Shaunana Elizabeth Gollier, was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Dave and Liz had children around the same age. However, Dave felt Liz wasn't a suitable long-term partner due to her limited education and lack of shared interests. Their relationship focused more on physical intimacy than meaningful conversations. Over time, Liz grew increasingly interested in what Dave was doing when she wasn't around, particularly in regards to who he was seeing. However, Dave consistently reminded her that they were in an open relationship, implying that she shouldn't be concerned about his interactions with others. He also reassured her that she had the freedom to date other men if she chose to do so. Despite Dave's openness, Liz couldn't shake off her feelings of dissatisfaction and jealousy, particularly towards Dave's children and their mother, Amy. She struggled to understand the close bond that persisted between Dave and Amy even after their breakup. As a result, Liz's behavior became increasingly possessive, prompting Dave to create distance between them. It was during this period of separation that Carrie entered Dave's life. Carrie was not only beautiful but also stylish, intelligent, and a great conversationalist. Dave found himself lost in conversation with her for hours, feeling an undeniable connection as they shared common interests and perspectives. Liz noticed that Dave was becoming increasingly distant, so she tried to rekindle their connection by sending messages, emails, and making phone calls. However, he had no intention of stopping his interactions with Carrie or anyone else for her sake. Meanwhile, Carrie and Dave were spending more nights together, which was convenient for Carrie's work schedule and enjoyable for Dave. Carrie seemed to be taking things lightly, focusing on having fun and not looking for anything serious. In December 2015, Liz was shot and non-fatally wounded, leading her to suspect who might be responsible and realize she needed to take action. 2 years prior, on November 13, 2012, Carrie had kissed Dave goodbye before he left for work, expecting to see him later. However, that would be the last time they saw each other. At 9:45 a.m. that morning, Dave received a surprising text message from Carrie stating she wanted to move in with him permanently. Dave found this message disconcerting as they had previously discussed and agreed not to rush into a relationship, being happy with their current situation. Dave replied that he wasn't ready for such a change, but Carrie's response was unpleasant and filled with profanity. He was shocked to discover that all of Carrie's belongings were gone from the apartment. This led him to believe she had left him for good. That same day, Carrie also removed him as a friend on Facebook, which seemed like the end of the matter. However, Dave started getting multiple rude texts and emails from Carrie daily, containing curses and threats to ruin his life. Carrie sent a large number of these messages, all of which were aggressive. Uncharacteristically, she also stopped showing up for work, despite being known for her punctuality. Strange messages weren't only sent to Dave but also to her mother and 15-year-old son, Max. She claimed to have found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max with her, but wanted to be alone for the time being due to worries over her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie posted on Facebook that she'd left of her own free will and was tired of criticism. She wasn't missing her old life but wasn't ready to return home. Carrie asserted her independence as a grown woman, stating that she had the right to leave home if she chose to. She apologized for hurting everyone by leaving abruptly. However, as time passed, Carrie failed to reappear. Her mother became increasingly concerned when Carrie missed important family events, including her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other celebrations. The final indication that something was seriously wrong was when Carrie missed her father's funeral. Liz began receiving messages from Carrie, which were insulting, humiliating, and even threatening. Carrie warned Liz to stay away from Dave. Confused by Carrie's behavior, Liz reached out to Dave, who revealed he was facing a similar situation. Carrie was sending him messages and emails, accusing him of wrongdoing, calling him a liar, and vowing revenge for the pain he allegedly caused her. The messages were sometimes ominous, with Carrie claiming to know what Dave was doing at the moment. The shared experience brought Dave and Liz closer together, but also made Dave feel guiltier about the trouble he had caused. The messages from Carrie grew more menacing and were filled with grammatical errors and illogical content. This was unusual, as Carrie's mother claimed that her daughter had always been a calm person who wrote coherent and well-structured letters and documents. Carrie was known to be meticulous about spelling and writing style. It's possible that she had experienced even more severe mental health issues. Her actions seemed to be driven solely by her uncontrolled mental state. A key indicator of dissociative identity disorder, also known as split personality, is the presence of separate, simultaneous self-consciousness in each ego, each with its own distinct memories, thoughts, behaviors, and inclinations towards specific actions. This might explain Carrie's unusual behavior and altered writing style. Everything suggested she was unstable, which is why the police didn't initially consider her missing, instead focusing on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave. They tried to track Carrie's cell phone, but it was unsuccessful due to blocked signals. Meanwhile, Liz and Dave continued to receive hundreds of texts and emails, sometimes simultaneously receiving nasty messages when they were together. Dave and Liz continued dating, but he felt uneasy around her as she became increasingly demanding. Despite claiming to be fine with their no-commitment relationship, Liz's behavior suggested otherwise. Every time Dave tried to end things with Liz, Carrie would start texting him, bonding with him over their shared victimization. This common ground drew Dave and Carrie closer together, causing them to reunite repeatedly. In January 2013, a missing car was surprisingly found in Dave's front yard. However, the fingerprints on the steering wheel didn't match Carrie's, and the car showed no suspicious signs. The police eventually returned the car to Carrie's parents. Carrie continued to message Liz and Dave, escalating her behavior by sending pictures of their children and threatening to harm them unless Dave left Liz alone. As time passed, Carrie's stalking persisted, and Liz's jealousy grew, frustrating Dave. He became exhausted with the events unfolding in his life and eventually found the strength to end his relationship with Liz. This decision came shortly after a tragic incident in August 2013, when Liz reported a fire at her home that resulted in the death of all her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz suspected Carrie was responsible, citing repeated threats made via texts and emails. The incident marked a significant turning point in the case of missing person Carrie Farver, leading to Carrie's placement on a federal wanted list. Tens of thousands of messages were meticulously analyzed. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz, as they believed Dave was also in danger. Someone had vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked and thrown a brick through his window. It appeared that Carrie's anger was directed at anyone in Dave's life. Consequently, Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife, began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. As Dave spent time with his children, he also saw Amy regularly. The police were perplexed as to why Carrie, who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks, was now stalking Dave and his ex-wife. The investigators decided to focus on Dave Coupa, as Carrie's disappearance raised many questions that needed to be answered. It was a mystery that didn't add up. Carrie Farver's family was also tirelessly searching for her, exploring every possible lead to find her. Their efforts finally paid off in the spring of 2015, when detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty took on the case. Unfortunately, they found no evidence that Carrie was still alive. One of the detectives shared their thoughts with ABC News. It's unusual for adults to suddenly leave without using any money. No one saw or heard from her, which doesn't make sense. She had a good income and a nice home. I've come to believe that I have no proof she's alive. With the help of a digital forensics expert, the detectives analyzed data from Kropa and Gore's phones from 2013. Kawa discovered that Carrie had sent over 50,000 texts and 15,000 emails to Dave in just 3 years. Whoever was impersonating Carrie became increasingly sophisticated, trying to hide their IP address and true identity. Somebody with expertise in computer programs seemed to be behind the strange occurrences. In December 2015, Liz Gard contacted the police again, this time reporting that she had been shot in the leg on her own doorstep. She claimed her attacker was Amy Flora, not Carrie. Coincidentally, Dave was missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. This new development raised suspicions that Amy might be involved in Carrie's disappearance. The investigation uncovered a lead that suggested Amy's motive. She may have been seeking revenge against women connected to Dave Krupp. Amy's relationship with Dave had been complicated, and the presence of other women in his life might have prevented them from reuniting. The police promptly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, she had a solid alibi. Multiple witnesses confirmed that she was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, so no arrest was made. The investigation became increasingly puzzling. New details emerged from the analysis of Liz's cell phone data. Investigators found fake email addresses using variations of Farver's name and an app used to schedule messages. This discovery shed light on how Liz and Dave received simultaneous messages from Carrie. The investigation led to suspicion of Liz Gollier, which intensified when her fingerprint matched those on Carrie's car steering wheel. It was now clear who the culprit was, and the priority was to prevent further harm. To catch Liz off guard, detectives devised a plan to create a fake narrative, pretending to still consider Amy the prime suspect, aiming to prevent Liz from escaping or destroying evidence. Liz fell for the trap. She was thrilled at the opportunity to eliminate another rival who was threatening her relationship with Dave. Soon after, Liz Gollier gave the police an email supposedly written by Amy. The email included a confession to kidnapping Carrie, along with specific details about the crime. According to the confession, Carrie had been stabbed in the stomach or chest area before her body was disposed of. The email also revealed information about Carrie's car and home that had not been publicly disclosed. According to an investigative spokeswoman, Liz provided detectives with information that only someone intimately involved in the crime could have known. In doing so, she inadvertently implicated herself in Carrie Farver's murder. The letter made it clear that the crime occurred in a car, prompting authorities to re-examine the victim's vehicle. Upon removing the seat covers and fabric, specialists discovered a blood stain belonging to Carrie Farver. Liz managed to send messages posing as Carrie without arousing suspicion, but it's unclear how. Reports suggest that Liz Gollier led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. Notably, Garrett's IP address was linked to messages sent under Carrie's name. When questioned, Garrett revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with Liz. Out of kindness, Garrett invited Liz to move in with him and his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and deteriorated significantly once they started living together. Garrett would often take care of Liz's children while she isolated herself in her room or left the house. Garrett was shocked by what the police told him. It was discovered that Liz spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be a missing woman. Although her room was messy, no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did discover several cell phones and electronic devices in the last place she stayed. In late December 2016, Shaunana Liz was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutor commented on the complexity of the investigation, stating that most murders are dark, but this crime was particularly bizarre. It would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. Liz's actions, including letting her dog die in a fire she set herself and shooting herself in the thigh, were attempts to deflect suspicion from herself. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, believed the case against her was weak since it was largely based on circumstantial evidence. Key pieces of evidence were missing, including Carrie's body and the crime weapon, and Liz had not confessed to the crime. In fact, there was no conclusive proof that Carrie was even dead. The defense team requested a mistrial, which would allow a judge to determine the extent of Shaunana's guilt. The prosecution presented a substantial amount of complex electronic evidence, as well as physical evidence. They argued that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car supported the theory that she had been stabbed. Investigators also found a direct link between Shaunana and Carrie's murder by analyzing a memory card that Shaunana had used around the time Carrie went missing. The memory card, which was found in a tablet stored at Dave's residence, contained deleted images. It was clear that the foot belonged to a people who had been deceased for several years. Notably, Carrie had a similar tattoo among her distinguishing features. Her mother later confirmed that the tattoo indeed belonged to Carrie. The photo solidified the conviction of Shaunana Liz was predator. The judge ruled her guilty of first-degree murder and handed down a life sentence without parole, stating that Carrie Farver did not disappear by choice but was tragically murdered. Authorities suspect that Shaunana murdered Carrie, allowed her body to decompose, and then burned the remains to eliminate all evidence. Motivated by jealousy, she decided to eliminate her rival. After disposing of Carrie, Shaunana took her cell phone and used it to send messages that would make Farver appear unstable and win back Dave's favor. When this plan succeeded, Shaunana wanted to eliminate Amy as well, but she became too entangled in her own scheme and ultimately fell into her own trap. Shaunana, also known as Liz, was also found guilty of arson for setting fire to her own home in August 2013 and attempting to blame it on Carrie. The fire destroyed the house and killed pets, resulting in an additional 20-year prison sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women, despite maintaining her innocence. Dave revealed that he received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he claimed that he never noticed Carrie stalking him during their relationship, which contrasts with his experience with Shaunana. So, what happened to Carrie's son, Maxwell Farver? According to his LinkedIn profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps and became a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science, and is now married. Although it's unlikely he's forgotten the past, he may have found some peace with his new family. As for Dave Kropa, he now lives a private life, away from the public eye. He doesn't have a public account on any social media platform. This disturbing crime story is a harsh reminder of the complexities and manipulation that can occur in human relationships. It highlights how vulnerable we can be in our own surroundings, unaware of the true nature of those around us. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown was born in 1979, radiated positivity and warmth, impacting those around her. Her numerous pursuits often left friends and family wondering how she managed it all, but her true passion was being a mother. Despite having to care for Noah, her son, this has not negatively affected her life. Instead, make Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism as a child. As she cared for Noah, Jennifer became his rock and closest friend. They spent countless hours together, sharing joyful moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Their heartwarming bond evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from those who knew them. The small town adored this family for their genuine kindness and cheerful nature. Tragedy struck unexpectedly on January 3, 2023, when Jennifer vanished without leaving behind any clues. On January 4, 2023, Antonio Blair Watts Richardson contacted the Limerick Township Police Department, deeply concerned about his close friend Jennifer's disappearance. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard from her, Antonio's anxiety was growing by the minute. Despite numerous attempts, he couldn't reach Jennifer, which was unusual since she was always responsive, especially when it came to her son Noah. Jennifer's family and friends knew her as a devoted mother and caring person, making her sudden disappearance alarming. Antonio's call to the police initiated a lengthy and mysterious investigation. A massive search effort began, involving police officers, family, and friends, all hoping to find clues about Jennifer's disappearance. The main question on everyone's mind was what could have caused Jennifer to leave her son without explanation. At 4 p.m., Officer Stephen Crawford from the Limerick Township Police Department visited the Brown family home to check on the situation. He observed Jennifer's vehicle parked near the porch. Upon entering the house, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone still inside. However, Jennifer's personal cell phone was nowhere to be found. When police attempted to track the phone, they discovered it had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th, and the signal couldn't be traced after that. The last known location of the phone was near the intersection of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick. This discovery marked the first significant lead in the investigation and indicated that something ominous had occurred. As a result, Jennifer was officially reported missing, and the police launched an investigation. Investigators questioned Jennifer's family, friends, and neighbors, but none of them had any information about her disappearance. Her loved ones, including her Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Antonio, were adamant that Jennifer would never leave her son behind. As a devoted mother, she would never abandon her child. Despite efforts, no leads were found in Jennifer's disappearance. Her family appealed to the public and a reward was offered for information, but yielded nothing, leaving unanswered questions and growing anxiety. The police investigation started by examining the events of that day, focusing on Jennifer's close friend Antonio, who was the last person to see her alive. On what seemed like an ordinary January day, Jennifer and Antonio spent time in the living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. As their kids often played together, Jennifer asked Antonio to pick up her son Noah from school. Antonio agreed and headed to the school to get Noah. The next day, however, Noah's behavior at school raised concerns among his teachers. They noticed that he had missed 2 doses of his medication, which was unusual given Jennifer's diligent care for her son's condition. She always kept his teachers informed about his health and any issues that arose at school. The school staff became concerned when they couldn't reach Jennifer. Noah told them Jennifer had gone to the grocery store but hadn't returned. She would never leave her son alone at this time. Antonio also tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. Antonio reported her missing to the police. As the investigation continued, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hope for her return began to fade with each passing day. It seemed she had vanished without a trace and might never be found. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 warehouse employees in nearby Limmer Township stumbled upon something unusual. They exited the building to grab coffee and stumbled upon what seemed to be a freshly dug hole. Upon closer inspection, they were shocked to find a woman's body buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who promptly arrived at the scene. The body was identified as Jennifer Brown, who had been missing for 2 weeks. The sheriff informed Jennifer's family that her body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Rosefort. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was caused by asphyxiation, with 3 broken ribs indicating a violent struggle with her killer. The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder case. Police re-interviewed Jennifer's family and friends, but these conversations yielded no new leads. The investigation seemed to be reaching a dead end, with no suspects in sight. However, just when detectives thought they had hit a roadblock, an unexpected lead emerged from an unforeseen source. After Jennifer's disappearance and murder were made public, the police asked anyone with relevant information to come forward. Noah's teacher responded to this request. She remembered an incident that initially seemed insignificant but raised serious concerns after Jennifer's death. The teacher reported that Noah shared an important detail about the day Jennifer disappeared. Noah told his teacher that when Antonio picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mom's personal cell phone among Antonio's belongings. Noah recognized the phone because the lock screen showed his own childhood photo. This information proved crucial in the investigation into Jennifer's murder. Previously, investigators suspected that Jennifer's killer had taken her phone. Now, Antonio became the main suspect. The police started investigating the relationship between Jennifer and Antonio, uncovering surprising details. Initially, Jennifer and Antonio's friendship appeared strong and enduring. They spent a significant amount of time together, were well acquainted, and their families socialized with one another. However, once the financial dealings between them became known, one that had been concealed behind their seemingly friendly relationship. Antonio owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which had declined and closed in early 2022. Following this, Antonio sought help from Jennifer in August 2022. To support her friend, Jennifer decided to invest in Antonio's business, helping him reopen Bird's Kitchen in a new location. They signed a contract that required Jennifer to provide regular financial support to sustain the restaurant, making payments approximately every 6 weeks. To rebuild Bird's Kitchen, Jennifer gave Antonio approximately $36,000 from August to January. They agreed she would give him another $99,000. Antonio was supposed to find a new location, pay rent, sign a contract, and reopen the restaurant in January 2023. However, Antonio spent the money on personal needs instead of the business. As a result, the property owners canceled their agreement with him on December 26, 2022, because he failed to meet his financial obligations. This left Antonio in a difficult situation, losing both money and the opportunity to open the restaurant. The police suspected Antonio of committing a crime to save his business due to his desperate situation. Upon investigating Jennifer's iPad, they found 2 unauthorized transfers of $177,000 to Bird's Kitchen on January 3rd. These transfers were not part of the agreement between Jennifer and Antonio, and they initially failed due to two-factor authentication, which was later disabled. This evidence increasingly implicated Antonio in her murder. Police interviewed the owners of the property where Antonio lived, who had recently terminated his lease. Surprisingly, on January 4th, the same day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he had met with them, claiming he had the money to sign a new lease. This led investigators to believe that Antonio was likely the killer, but they knew he would not confess easily. They needed concrete evidence to prove his guilt. To gather more information, investigators spoke with Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor. They asked her about Antonio's whereabouts on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara told them that Antonio had visited the Brown family at around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and didn't return home until 4:30 a.m. the next morning, when he picked up Noah from the bus stop. She also mentioned that Antonio came home briefly, then left again around 5 p.m. and didn't return until late that night. This timeline became a crucial focus point for further investigation. Further investigation found that Antonio spent the night with his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and didn't meet her until 8 p.m. This left a 3-hour gap with no alibi. Based on evidence, detectives created a timeline of the murder. According to them, Antonio went to Jennifer's house on January 3rd around 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her while Noah was at school. Antonio then transferred funds from Jennifer's iPad to his account and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped off Noah, and went back to dispose of the body. He buried it in a shallow grave in a field near Roseford. Afterwards, he went to Tatiana's house and spent the night. Everything seemed carefully planned, but one mistake led the police to Antonio. The mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. The police had enough evidence to convict him but investigated further to confirm his guilt. This involved film experts and a trained dog that could detect cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was taken to Jennifer's home to familiarize itself with her scent. This was the same location where the crime had occurred, in her kitchen. The police then led the dog to Antonio's car, where it immediately picked up the same scent. This final piece of evidence solidified the detective's suspicions of Antonio's involvement in the murder. After months of investigation, Antonio was arrested on February 8 and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will face the law for his alleged crimes. Jennifer's loved ones were devastated by her death, especially since the killer was someone they trusted. Now that the killer has been brought to justice, the case was finally closed. The boys' observation of the killer's mistake played a crucial role in uncovering the truth and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The tragic events in Limer Township serve as a reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes will ultimately be solved. Cruel and inhumane acts will not go unpunished, and those responsible will face the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Graciela Graciela. Graciela Graciela was born on October 6, 19, in Mexico, to a working-class family who sought a better future for their children. To achieve this, her parents made the decision to immigrate to the United States, ultimately settling in Hermiston, Oregon. As Graciela was very young at the time of the move, she has no recollection of the challenges associated with relocating. Upon reaching school age, Graciela attended Umatilla High School, an institution that predominantly served students from low-income backgrounds. The school provided all students with free meals, reflecting the socioeconomic status of its student body, of which 66% were Hispanic. It was here that Graciela's sociable nature and innate charm enabled her to effortlessly form friendships among her peers. After graduating, she proceeded to enroll in the business department at Blue Mountain College. From a young age, Graciela had always dreamed of becoming a hairstylist and owning her own beauty salon. With determination and hard work, she believed she could make her dreams a reality. By February 2006, she had achieved her goal and became the owner of Cuz Beauty Salon. Graciela's talent and charisma quickly made her a well-known figure in society. As the salon's owner, she always presented herself well, which added to the salon's positive image. Her passion for her job and understanding of the latest beauty trends ensured a steady stream of clients. Over time, some of these clients became close friends, who were always welcome at her home. Graciela was highly respected in the town, not only for her professional success but also for her interesting and happy personal life. Her first love, with whom she had two daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, also known as Gabby, was someone she met in her youth. Although the relationship didn't last long, and the father of her children left the family, Graciela didn't let this setback hold her back. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and continued to move forward as a single mother. Graciela later earned a degree in cosmetology. She then met a kind-hearted man of Mexican descent named Romero Sanchez, and they got married. Her children from a previous relationship reported that she never regretted this decision. Her husband was caring not only to her but also to her children, treating them as his own. The family later welcomed two more children, Arthur and Jacob. Although he had biological sons, Graciela's husband still affectionately referred to Annabelle and Gabriella as his girls. Gabby considered her stepfather to be her real father, as he consistently supported, protected, and cared for them. The couple prioritized keeping their family united and happy, raising 4 children together. This did not deter Graciela from pursuing her passion. Instead, she would often take her children with her to professional meetings. The family developed a lovely tradition of traveling together, exploring new cities, local attractions, and cultural features. They also prioritized staying connected to their roots, frequently visiting Mexico and enjoying quality time together. Everyone made a genuine effort to make each other happy. However, after 17 years of marriage, the couple decided to separate. Graciela and her ex-husband chose not to burden each other with their dwindling feelings, opting to preserve the respectful relationship they had built over the years. Even after the divorce, they maintained a warm and strong connection. The father remained involved in the children's lives, regularly seeing them and sharing custody of their youngest son with Graciela. The other children were grown and lived on their own, but they remained close to their parents. They would get together to celebrate holidays and often sought each other's advice. Graciela handled her divorce well, remaining optimistic and confident, thanks in part to her ex-husband's kind and understanding behavior during this challenging time. On November 9, 2019, Romero made an unexpected visit to Annabelle, Graciela's eldest daughter. Annabelle was surprised to see her mother's new husband show up unexpectedly. Romero told Annabelle that Graciela had disappeared. According to Romero, he and Graciela had met with Jacob the previous night. Afterward, Romero returned home and went to bed beside Graciela, who was already asleep. However, when he woke up in the morning, Graciela was gone. He searched the house but couldn't find her. Romero tried to contact Graciela by calling and texting her, but she didn't respond. He went to Annabelle's place hoping she might have some information about Graciela's disappearance. Annabelle, however, had no idea where her mother was. She was shocked not only by the news of her mother's disappearance but also by Romero's reaction. He was in tears and seemed genuinely upset. Annabelle found this odd because Romero had never shown any strong emotions around them before, only indifference. Romero mentioned that Graciela had been acting strangely and might have found someone else. He admitted she might have needed a break from their relationship and wasn't sure if she was truly happy with him. However, Annabelle found his words insincere and his tears overly dramatic. She started to worry about her mother and found Romero's behavior suspicious. Romero had previously avoided talking to Graciela's children, but suddenly reached out to them. After he left, Annabelle told the rest of the family what happened. They gathered at Graciela's house to figure out what was going on. Her car was still parked in the driveway, which was unusual since she would have likely taken it if she were leaving Romero. The house was also spotlessly tidy, which was out of character for Graciela, who preferred a more creative and chaotic space. If she were planning to leave, her belongings would have been scattered around the room. Graciela spent a considerable amount of time in front of the mirror, carefully selecting an outfit for the day. However, she surprisingly left all her treasured jewelry at home, including her favorite rings and necklaces that she wore daily. This unusual behavior raised concerns among her family members, who couldn't help but imagine worst-case scenarios, including the possibility of her fleeing. While searching the house, Gabby stumbled upon something peculiar, a large, heavy blanket in the washing machine. This was unusual because their mother, Graciela, always emphasized the importance of not overloading appliances. It was likely that Romero, who normally didn't participate in household chores, had washed the blanket. This sparked suspicion that he might be trying to conceal something. It was later discovered that along with Graciela, several important items had gone missing from the house, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone. On November 11th, Annabelle went to the police station to report her mother, Graciela, missing. However, she was surprised to find that Romero, Graciela's husband, had not informed the police about her disappearance, despite knowing about it since November 9th or possibly earlier. As a result, Annabelle became the first person to file a missing person report for her mother. Romero's distant personality had been a concern for Graciela's family since they met him. Graciela had met Romero at her beauty salon, where he was a client, after her divorce. Their initial friendship eventually developed into a romantic relationship. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they noticed his aloof and cold demeanor. Annabelle and her sister, Gabby, tried several times to connect with Romero, but he did not reciprocate, leaving Graciela's children puzzled by his behavior. They initially attributed it to individual personality differences, especially compared to their mother's previous relationships. They were eager to understand their mother's partner and what motivated him. At times, he seemed strange and aloof to them, and they struggled to comprehend how someone as lively and joyful as their mother could be drawn to someone so serious and reserved. Despite their reservations, they respected her decision. When their mother shared the news of her upcoming wedding, everyone rallied around her, particularly the girls, who wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests couldn't help but notice Romero's haughty demeanor and restraint. Some even perceived him as excessively possessive, as he dominated the bride's attention. When Graciella's young children came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero responded with disdain rather than warmth and affection, making it clear that he didn't want to share his wife's attention with anyone, not even her own family. After that, Graciella's relatives struggled to hide their genuine opinions about Romero. Annabelle even went so far as to say she didn't consider him a stepfather, let alone a father figure. The family simply wanted to have a normal relationship, like those found in any civilized household. Following the wedding, Graciella and Romero moved in together, along with her youngest son Jacob, into Graciella's home. Jacob shared that shortly after the wedding, Romero started behaving as if he was the sole owner of the house. The boy recalled that the initial honeymoon phase was brief, and soon the family started to fall apart. He observed that his mother initially tried to establish personal boundaries, but being non-confrontational, she quickly gave in to Romero's demands. This seemed to suit Romero, who had a quick temper and never apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the household, Graciella often conceded to Romero's wishes. As time went on, it seemed she realized she had rushed into the marriage without fully thinking it through. In private conversations, Graciella confessed to feeling trapped and suffocated in the relationship. Her husband exerted control over her, never allowing her to go anywhere alone. Despite this, she never expressed any desire to leave the abusive relationship, suggesting she was still in love with Romero. Everyone realized that Graciella was in a relationship with the wrong person. It became apparent that her partner, Romero, was jobless and financially dependent on her. The Graciella family, who valued hard work, found it frustrating that Romero was always by Graciella's side without any apparent reason. Romero was a master manipulator who kept a close eye on Graciella, monitoring her interactions, including her friendships with other women. He would either prevent her from going out or show up unexpectedly, as if checking on her loyalty. His extreme jealousy was suffocating. Graciella felt embarrassed by his behavior, which led her to isolate herself socially, only interacting with her family. This had a negative impact on her professional life, as her job required frequent client meetings and attending industry events. Those close to Graciella noticed a significant change in her demeanor. She looked sad, worn out, and had lost her usual cheerfulness. It was clear that she was unhappy. Even her children observed the changes in her mood and appearance, as well as her loss of independence. They discussed their concerns among themselves and concluded that, although they didn't like Romero, he was Graciella's choice, and they had to respect her decisions. Other relatives shared the family's distrust of Romero. However, no one knew how to intervene or offer support. The couple's issues were serious enough to require professional help. Gabby had once suggested this to her mother, but Graciella insisted on handling her personal life independently. In 2018, Graciella suddenly announced that she would relocate her beauty salon to her home, citing convenience. Her family was skeptical, as she had never mentioned this plan before, despite running the salon for 12 years. Some clients noted that Romero often hung around the salon, creating tension and disrupting the usually warm atmosphere. While some thought Graciella made the move to solve a problem, others suspected that her jealous husband was behind the decision. Despite the initial doubts, Graciella remained enthusiastic about the change, saying it allowed her to spend more time with Jacob and Romero. By the end of 2018, she and her husband were remodeling a room for the salon, but the project took longer than expected and wasn't completed until May 2019. Although the salon was closed temporarily, Graciella's reputation remained intact, and rumors of the studio's reopening attracted a long queue of clients, including new ones, months in advance. Graciella was thrilled with her professional success but became increasingly private about her personal life. Return to the moment before of Graciella's disappearance. Another incident raised concerns about Graciella's safety. She asked her daughter Gabby to pick her up, which was unusual. But she claimed everything was fine and said she was just having a disagreement with her husband. When they met up, they spent time together and Graciella seemed to relax. She smiled and told Gabby not to worry, saying that couples' arguments are normal and can actually bring people closer together. Despite this, Gabby couldn't shake off her worries and remained uneasy about her mother's situation. After Annabelle contacted the police, the relationship between Graciella's family and Romero rapidly deteriorated. He offered an explanation for his wife's disappearance, suggesting that she might have wanted some time alone or could have left with another man, and he believed she would soon return. This was his standard response to anyone inquiring about the situation. However, the police took the report seriously and initiated an investigation, considering the possibility that Graciella could have been a victim of a crime. They began by searching her home, where they found that only a few personal items were missing, with nothing else seeming out of the ordinary. The police also interviewed Graciella's children, her husband, and others close to the family, including her ex-husband. Although everyone expressed skepticism about Romero's behavior, the investigation did not uncover any significant information. Romero cooperated with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, participating in interrogations, providing his DNA, and undergoing a polygraph test. Despite his cooperation, the police did not have sufficient grounds to arrest him, so the investigation continued. Analysis of Graciella's phone records revealed her last known location was near a bridge in Washington on November 9 at 12:30 p.m., when the signal stopped after her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media remained inactive. Despite questioning hundreds of witnesses and checking all her frequent locations, investigators found no signs of her. The investigation deemed her disappearance suspicious due to the complete lack of evidence. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston police publicly stated that they had no confirmed information about Graciella's last sighting. Although Romero didn't report Graciella missing, the authorities didn't accuse him of anything. The police's stance frustrated Graciella's relatives, causing them to reduce communication with law enforcement. The family eventually stopped receiving weekly updates, forcing Graciella's children to contact the police station directly for information. As of March 2020, there were no new developments in Graciella's case. In an effort to revive the investigation, Graciella's family reached out to the media, hoping to raise public awareness and gather information. They believed even small details could be crucial. Gabby, a family member, expressed the family's frustration and disappointment with the police's lack of progress in the case. The Graciella family urged investigators to focus on finding Graciella, as they suspected foul play due to the state of her belongings and the unusual circumstances at home. It was unclear who would harm her, as she had no known enemies. Her family knew she wouldn't leave without contacting them, and the lack of communication suggested something was seriously wrong. The family also requested a new detective team, citing concerns of bias and collusion with Romero, whom they believed was somehow connected to the case. The family pointed out numerous inconsistencies in the investigation. It was found that Romero's phone had been turned off on the day his wife went missing, and his actions didn't seem like those of someone who was worried about a loved one disappearing suddenly. The Graciella family asked for Romero to be arrested. Police Chief Jason Edmiston quickly responded to these claims. He agreed that Mrs. Graciella's disappearance seemed suspicious and might involve something criminal. He said this was just one idea, but promised that the investigation would stay fair and be based on evidence and facts. Edmiston also denied that Romero had any connections to the police that might affect the case. Edmiston mentioned that false information was spreading and making the investigation harder. He said the case was ongoing and that some information had to be kept secret. The police also asked the FBI for help. Edmiston expressed frustration that people were criticizing the police without understanding how complicated the law is. At the same time, Gabby started a fundraiser to hire a private investigator. This move was seen as criticism of how the police were handling the case, suggesting they weren't doing their job well. 1 year after Graciella's disappearance, her family and friends held a memorial event to honor her memory and pray for her safe return. They lit candles and posted signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue searching for her. In September 2023, a significant development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez, Graciella's husband, was severely injured in an attack. There was speculation that Mason Graciella, Graciella's brother, was involved in the incident, but details and any potential consequences for Mason were not disclosed. It appeared that Graciella's family had become frustrated with the police's lack of progress in investigating Romero, leading to a potentially frightening outcome. Graciella's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in unbearable uncertainty that's taking a devastating toll on their health. Her children are left with only prayers, hoping for clarity and justice, unsure if she's alive. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Susan Wright. Susan Lucille Wright was born on April 24, 1976, in Houston, Texas, to parents Velma Sue and Jimmy Lawrence Wright. She was the eldest of 2 children and had a biological sister named Cindy. As a child, Susan was active, sociable, and creatively talented. During her school years, she developed a passion for dancing and aspired to become a choreographer. With her bright and attractive appearance, as well as her slender figure, she drew many admirers and being the center of attention. After completing high school, Susan tried but was unsuccessful in getting into college. To raise funds for her future education, she decided to take some time off. During this period, she found work as a dancer at a well-known nightclub, performing partially nude on stage. She decided to leave her job and use her savings to enroll in evening courses at a nursing school. To support herself and maintain her independence, Susan took a job as a waitress at a restaurant while pursuing her studies. However, she soon discovered that medicine was not her real passion and had trouble paying for her studies. Consequently, she stopped attending her classes to concentrate on her job. In the summer of 1997, 21-year-old Susan met her future husband, Jeffrey Andrew Wright, at the Galveston restaurant where she worked. He was immediately drawn to her beauty and radiant smile, becoming a regular customer and leaving generous tips. After some time, Jeffrey mustered the courage to ask Susan for her phone number. He would call her daily, sometimes multiple times a day, to arrange romantic dates and surprise her with small gestures, such as sending flowers with heartfelt notes to her workplace. In the evenings, he would meet her and walk her home. The man was 8 years older than Susan, but she didn't consider this a significant issue. He was charming, attentive, and caring, which quickly won her over. However, it soon became apparent that Jeffrey struggled with alcohol and substance abuse. He claimed to have overcome his addiction to drugs and promised to quit drinking entirely. Susan, being young and in love for the first time, believed him. She thought that their love could conquer any obstacle. Shortly after, Susan discovered she was pregnant and excitedly shared the news with Jeffrey. Although he seemed pleased about becoming a father, he didn't take any decisive action, such as proposing or suggesting they move in together. Confused by Jeffrey's behavior, Susan took matters into her own hands. She insisted that their child should be born within a married family, and Jeffrey agreed to her terms. By the time they officially got married, Susan was already 8 months pregnant. They chose to have a quiet, intimate wedding without guests or celebrations, rather than a grand ceremony. Around this time, they purchased a home in a quiet area of Harris County, Texas, and moved in a couple of weeks before the birth of their child. In December 1998, they welcomed their first child, a son named Bradley, and appeared to be the perfect family. In 2001, Susan became pregnant again, and in the spring of 2002, she gave birth to a daughter named Kay. The family had a small dog named Buck, a comfortable family car. Jeffrey worked at a local construction company, and after the children were born, Susan became a stay-at-home mom by mutual agreement. She took care of the kids and created a cozy home environment. The neighbors said that Mrs. Susan was a kind person, friendly, sociable, a caring mother, and a loving wife. However, it was later revealed that the reality of their family life was far from perfect. Her husband was extremely demanding in every aspect of their lives. Susan's days were filled with cleaning, doing laundry, and cooking. Jeffrey demanded freshly cooked meals every day, prohibiting her from preparing meals in advance or reheating leftovers. Maintaining a perfect and clean home was a challenging task, especially with 2 small children. Additionally, Jeffrey required his clothes to be washed almost daily, as he refused to wear the same item twice. If Susan failed to meet these expectations, she faced insults, humiliation, and even physical abuse. Moreover, Jeffrey was extremely frugal, providing Susan with a meager weekly allowance of $100 to cover all household expenses, including cooking, childcare, and maintenance. Susan had to keep track of every expense, giving receipts to her husband Jeffrey. However, Jeffrey's behavior was a bigger issue. Despite promising to quit drinking, he continued and started using drugs, downplaying it as light doping for work stress. The substances made him aggressive, causing him to harm Susan and their son. Jeffrey denied his behavior was a problem, claiming Susan knew about his substance use before marriage. His parents sympathized with Susan but felt powerless to intervene. After moving in together, Jeffrey's behavior became increasingly aggressive, leading to physical, emotional, and intimate abuse. He initially apologized, but the violence became regular. Jeffrey would often go to the gym 3 times a week to practice boxing as a stress relief measure. He looked forward to sharing this activity with his son when the boy was older. On January 13, 2003, Jeffrey returned home from the gym agitated and on edge. As Susan prepared dinner, he attempted to teach their 5-year-old son some boxing moves but lost control and struck the child, causing the boy to burst into tears. Susan pretended not to notice the incident, but it was the last straw for her. Following dinner, she put the kids to bed. Meanwhile, Jeffrey stayed in the bedroom, where he continued to take drugs. There are different accounts of what happened next. According to Susan, when she went into the room, Jeffrey assaulted her, attempted to rape her, and tried to stab her with a knife. She claimed she fought back in self-defense after managing to take the knife from him. The events that followed are unclear, with different accounts of what happened. According to Susan, when she entered the bedroom, Jeffrey tried to attack her, sexually assault her, and kill her with a knife. However, she claimed she managed to grab the knife and defended herself, leading to a fight. Her story changed multiple times, but the version told in court, based on the investigation, was considered more believable. Susan decided to use her dance skills to distract her husband and lower his guard. Wearing a short silk robe over her bare body, she put on a seductive show for Jeffrey. She then suggested a role-playing game that involved tying him up, which he agreed to. Using 3 of Jeffrey's neckties, she bound his hands and one leg to the bed. She used the silk belt from her robe to secure his other leg. With Jeffrey immobilized, Susan created a makeshift gag using her underwear, pretending it was part of the intimate game. To set the mood, She lit candles and turned off the lights. Jeffrey was tied to the bed with a gag in his mouth, unable to move or speak. The room was dimly lit. Jeffrey poured hot wax from a candle onto Jeffrey's chest, which was painful but initially seemed like part of a game they were playing. However, when she poured wax onto his genital area, the pain became unbearable. Jeffrey tried to free himself and scream, but he couldn't. His wife, Susan, took a small sharp knife from the kitchen and began stabbing him repeatedly, starting at his groin and moving up his body, slashing his genitals, legs, abdomen, chest, arms, neck, and face. She began slowly, expressing her grievances with each stab, recounting the insults, humiliations, and abuse she had suffered. As she continued, Susan began to cry and stab faster. Experts later counted 193 shallow knife wounds on Jeffrey's body. Most of these wounds were not fatal, and Jeffrey was conscious for most of the ordeal. Susan's actions suggested she was in a state of extreme emotional distress. Her lawyers argued that she was in a state of affect, unable to stop even when Jeffrey showed no signs of life. She had not considered what she would do next or how she would handle the body. Shallow grave in the backyard. She sat next to her husband's body on the floor for hours. Eventually, she looked around the blood-covered bedroom and knew she had to act before dawn. She carefully checked outside through the window, ensuring the coast was clear. Her gaze landed on a shallow pit in the backyard that Jeffrey had dug for a fountain over the weekend. A plan formed instantly. This pit would become her despised husband's grave. To move the body, Susan used a garden wheelbarrow. This raised questions for investigators, as a petite woman was able to single-handedly lift and transport a man twice her weight out of the house. Suspicions of an accomplice arose but were never confirmed. Under the cover of darkness, Susan discreetly relocated the body to the pit and covered it with a thin layer of soil. She then cleaned up, removing the blood-stained curtains and bed linen, placing them in trash bags and dispersing them in different bins. The blood-soaked mattress was flipped over, as Susan was unsure how to properly clean it. She spent the remaining time until dawn scrubbing blood from the floor, walls, and carpet. Scrubbing the carpet is a big deal, with a large stain that couldn't be removed. In an attempt to eliminate any evidence of the violent confrontation, Susan applied bleach to the affected area, hoping the chemicals would destroy any remaining traces. Susan made a distressing call to her husband's parents in Austin, Texas. She was emotional as she recounted the events. Her husband, under the influence, had physically assaulted her and their son, spilled bleach on the carpet, and then ended their relationship before leaving. Jeffrey's parents were shocked and concerned by the news. Although they were aware that their son had his flaws, they felt genuine sympathy for their daughter-in-law. However, when they learned that he had hit their grandchild, they immediately offered for Susan and the children to come and stay with them. Despite their willingness to help, the young mother declined their offer. She added that she planned to file a police report and reveal all the incidents that had occurred at their residence. 2 days later, Susan visited the police station as her husband's sudden disappearance raised increasing concerns and action was necessary. Susan reported that she and her children had been victims of domestic violence perpetrated by her husband and required protection. She successfully obtained a restraining order against her husband, preventing him from approaching her and the children, although she was already aware that he would never be able to come near them again. As evidence, Susan presented bruises and cuts on her arms, which she alleged were inflicted by her husband using keys when she attempted to defend herself. Additionally, Susan had a small bruise on his face and corroborated that his father had struck him. At first, the tearful woman's story seemed believable and logical. She claimed her husband, under the influence of alcohol and substances, had attacked her and their young son. Then, realizing what he had done, he became scared and fled. However, over time, suspicions grew because Jeffrey had not contacted anyone. He appeared to have run away without his belongings, documents, or mobile phone. He didn't show up for work or visit his parents, and none of his friends or neighbors had seen him. It was as if he had vanished. Susan found it unbearable to stay in the house where she confronted her husband. She couldn't shake the feeling he was still alive and would rise for revenge. She was losing her grip on reality. Even their dog Buck sensed it, constantly barking, trying to dig up the yard where Jeffrey was buried. On January 17th, Susan went to her mother's house with her children. When her mother saw her daughter in person, she fully realized the severity of the situation. Even though she had already been aware of it, Velma directly asked if she had killed her husband, and her daughter broke down in tears, nodding in admission. The daughter then confessed to the crime, revealing the location of her husband's body, and repeatedly expressed uncertainty about what to do next. Following her mother's advice, Susan reached out to lawyer Neil Davis the next day and confessed to killing her husband and attempting to cover up the crime. After gathering all the details, the experienced defense attorney considered possible scenarios and contacted the Harris County District Attorney's Office on January 19th. Davis reported Susan's confession, including the burial of her husband's body in their backyard, and stated that she was willing to provide a full statement at the police station. On January 24, 2003, Susan voluntarily went to the police station, intent on making a full confession. However, her account was disjointed, with confusing details and occasional contradictions. She sometimes referred to her late husband as if he were still alive, expressed fear of him, and requested protection. Consequently, Susan underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The results revealed she had suffered a nervous breakdown and was experiencing depression. Despite this, the evaluation found that Susan was still capable of understanding the actions she had taken. When investigators uncovered the remains of Jeffrey from the makeshift grave in the backyard, they were shocked by the brutality of the scene, having never encountered. Experts counted a total of 193 knife wounds on the victim's body, distributed across various areas, including the groin, legs, shoulders, arms, abdominal area, chest, neck, and face. The majority of these wounds were superficial, meaning they were not life-threatening on their own. However, one head wound was severe enough to have caused death. The large number of superficial wounds suggests that the victim endured a prolonged and agonizing death, likely while still conscious, as his wife repeatedly stabbed him with a small knife. The victim's wrists and ankles showed deep marks from the ties and belt used to bind him. These injuries indicated that the victim had attempted to free himself but was unsuccessful. The ties and belt were still on the body when it was found. Additionally, there were traces of candle wax on the victim's chest and groin area. Susan claimed that the candle wax was an accident, resulting from her husband knocking over a lit candle. However, the prosecution argued that the hot wax was more likely used as a form of torture to inflict suffering on the bound victim. Furthermore, the victim's mouth contained his wife's underwear, which acted as a gag to prevent him from screaming or calling for help. Toxicological tests showed the deceased had alcohol and several controlled substances in his system, which could have led to aggressive and irrational behavior. Initially, the bedroom where the confrontation occurred seemed normal, except for a large bleach stain on the carpet. However, upon closer inspection using special chemical agents and equipment, it became clear that Susan had spent considerable time cleaning up the scene. Once wiped away blood traces were revealed, the true extent of the violence became apparent. Blood was found throughout the room, including on the ceiling, and the mattress was saturated with it. The trial began in late February 2004, with Susan having already spent a year in custody. Her children were being cared for by her parents and sister Cindy. Her lawyer was well prepared, having worked extensively with Susan to build her case. During the trial, Susan frequently broke down in tears as she recounted the events of that horrific night and the abuse she suffered leading up to it. She claimed to have endured years of cruelty and violence at the hands of her husband. The defendant, Susan, claimed that on the evening of the incident, her husband returned home from training in an agitated state. He began demonstrating boxing techniques to their 5-year-old son, Bradley, and said the boy would also take up boxing. When Bradley refused, his father hit him in the face. Susan put the children to bed and then tried to have a serious talk with her husband, urging him to seek help at a clinic. However, he became angry, grabbed his keys, and tried to leave. Susan attempted to stop him, which led to a struggle that caused injuries to her palms and wrists. According to Susan, her husband then struck her, causing her to fall and momentarily lose her bearings. After regaining composure, Susan saw her husband Jeffrey holding a knife, but her testimony became inconsistent. Her lawyer argued she was in a state of affect, leading her to seize the knife and strike Jeffrey. Susan claimed she secured him to a cart with ties and a belt after the confrontation, and candle wax accidentally landed on his body. However, the defendant had no explanation for why her underwear was found in the victim's mouth. In contrast, the prosecution presented a more convincing and logical case. Expert testimony revealed that the victim's wrist and ankle wounds were inflicted before death, likely as part of a ruse to restrain the victim. This also provided a plausible explanation for the gag in the victim's mouth. Additionally, the angle of the injuries suggested that the perpetrator was positioned on top of the victim, rather than struggling with him, which would have resulted in different injury patterns. All the cuts on the victim were inflicted from the front, indicating that the attack occurred while he was lying on his back, unable to move. It was unclear whether Susan had planned her husband's murder in advance and intentionally used the pit he dug for a fountain as a makeshift grave. Prosecutors, however, suspected that she had carefully orchestrated the crime, motivated by the potential insurance payout. The case drew widespread media attention, with Susan being labeled the blue-eyed butcher or blonde meat grinder by the press. Jeffrey's family demanded the harshest possible sentence, while many of their neighbors felt sorry for Susan, recalling instances where she had bruises that she attributed to her own clumsiness, but which may have been signs of physical abuse. Prosecutors initially sought a life sentence for Susan, but later reduced their request to 45 years in prison. In March 2004, she was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. She showed no emotion when the judge delivered the verdict, appearing detached from the proceedings. A year later, her lawyer's attempt to appeal the decision was rejected. In 2008, Susan and her defense team filed another appeal, which was influenced by new testimony from a previously unknown witness. Misty McKell, wife of former NFL champion Steve McKell, was a key witness. She had a lengthy relationship with Jeffrey Wright in the mid-1990s and was briefly engaged to him. However, she suffered physical abuse, humiliation, and cruel treatment from Jeffrey, leading her to end the engagement and cut ties. Following this new information in Jeffrey's testimony, Susan's prison sentence was reduced to 20 years. She became eligible for parole in 2014 at age 38 but was denied. A second denial followed in July 2017. After 16 years in prison, Susan Wright was released in the winter of 2020 at age 44. She was met by reporters and photographers, causing her to break down in tears and asked to be left alone. Her trial received extensive media coverage, including a broadcast on Court TV. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Channin Starbuck. Channin Starbuck, a 42-year-old woman, was born on April 19, 1969, in Anderson, Indiana, as the youngest child with two older brothers. Her parents eventually divorced and started new families, resulting in additional siblings for Channin. On December 3, 2011, Channin was discovered on the floor of her bedroom, positioned in a suggestive manner. An erotic massager was placed on her stomach, indicating a clear attempt to humiliate her after death. The police immediately suspected foul play due to the numerous bruises and scrapes on her body. A medical examiner later confirmed that some of the injuries were caused by a stun gun, and evidence suggested that her body had been moved. The official cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The detectives assigned to solve the case faced a difficult task. They needed to reconstruct the final hours of Channon's life and identify the perpetrator. Channon, a mother of 5, had been reported missing by her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, a day before her body was found. Clay, 47, had alerted the authorities that he had been unable to contact Channon since December 1st at approximately 3 p.m. Channon sent a text to her daughter, saying she couldn't pick up the kids from school because she wasn't feeling well. She asked them to wait for their father, claiming she had already informed him of the change in plans. However, his phone was turned off, so he didn't know what was going on. The younger siblings, Marshall and Serena, were tired and hungry, so 15-year-old Logan decided to call her older brother Austin for help. She asked him to drive them to their father's house, which was just a couple of blocks away. When they arrived, Austin said he couldn't reach their mother either. He thought maybe she had turned off her phone to rest. Austin put the kids in the car and drove them to their father's house. Clay was surprised to see them but was happy to spend time with his kids. Since the older kids had lived with him after the divorce, and the younger ones had stayed with their mother, Clay decided to enjoy the unexpected visit and didn't contact Channon. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened with her. Clay expected to see Channon at the school basketball game that evening, but she didn't show up. The next day, December 2nd, Clay took the kids to school and then went to Channon's house. The front door was locked, and the blinds were closed. Since he didn't have a spare key, he couldn't get in. Clay sent a message saying that if Channon didn't show up by 7 p.m., he would contact the police. After waiting until the agreed time, Clay went to the police station to report Channon Starbuck's disappearance. 2 sheriff's deputies visited her address but found nothing suspicious, so they returned to the station. The officer told Clay to wait one more day. If he still hadn't heard from Channon after that, he should return to the station. The next day, Clay returned to the police station, and it was then that he discovered he wasn't the only one looking for Channon. A friend and her mother had also reported being unable to contact her, which was unusual for Channon. This new information prompted the police to take the case more seriously. It had been 48 hours since Channon's disappearance, and several people were worried about her. The police visited Channon's home again. Upon entering the residence, they found no signs of forced entry or robbery. Initially, everything appeared to be in order. However, when they entered Channon's bedroom, they discovered the disturbing truth. Channon Starbuck's disappearance was a result of a brutal murder. In her room, investigators found an unmade bed with a blanket nearby, but the sheet was missing and the mattress cover had red stains. Her cell phone and diary were on the dresser. Forensic experts examined the room for fingerprints, finding 12 latent prints on the massager box and bathroom mirror, while some surfaces had been wiped clean. DNA analysis was conducted on traces found in common areas, and specialists took scrapings from under Channon's nails, face, and neck. Detectives believed the murder occurred after Channon got out of the shower, and her body was moved to the bed and then the floor. The missing sheet was found in a washing machine, suggesting the perpetrator tried to eliminate evidence. Clay arrived at Channon's house by noon to find out what had happened to his ex-wife. However, the scene at her yard was ominous, with yellow tape cordoning off the area, an ambulance, and several police cars parked near the lawn. Clay was the first to be informed of the tragic event. To gather more information about Channon and her lifestyle, the detectives questioned Clay after he had calmed down. He explained that he and his ex-wife had a morning routine where he would take the younger kids to school and she would pick them up afterwards. However, on December 1st, his car broke down a few blocks from home, disrupting their routine. Clay had texted Shannon to ask her to take the kids to school. It was supposed to warm up around 11 a.m., but when he tried to start the car again, it still wouldn't start. He gave up and went back inside to take a nap. Clay slept for several hours without being disturbed, during which time his cell phone ran out of battery. To support his story, he showed the police his correspondence with his ex-wife, Shannon. Initially, everything seemed to add up. Clay was cooperative, providing his cell phone, DNA, and fingerprints. He also expressed concern for Shannon, explaining that their divorce had made her more vulnerable. When asked for more information, Clay revealed that Shannon had joined a dating site after becoming single. As an attractive woman, she had many admirers. According to Clay, she might have been seeing multiple people at the same time, and one of them might have been responsible for her death. Unfortunately, he didn't have any specific names to share. During the conversation, Clay became emotional and cried, struggling to accept Shannon's death. After recording his statement, the police sent him home. He had to break the news of their mother's death to their children. At the start of the investigation, the case surrounding Shannon's Starbucks demise was gathering momentum. Investigators questioned the Shannon family's neighbors, focusing on every detail, especially reports of unfamiliar people and vehicles in recent weeks. An autopsy revealed severe injuries, including chest trauma consistent with the use of a stun gun, 10 broken ribs, and head and body injuries likely caused by a blunt object. The severity of the injuries made it difficult to determine the exact time of death, but the expert estimated that Shannon's life ended between December 1st and 2. Scratches on her body suggested that she had been moved, and her broken neck bone supported this theory. The medical examiner found evidence of strangulation using a soft object, possibly a hand, towel, or sheet. A breakthrough in the case came from the analysis of body samples, which revealed male DNA. This suggested that the suspect might be one of Shannon's close male acquaintances, including her ex-husband or secret admirers. Clay Starbuck, her ex-husband, has cooperated fully with the investigation, including undergoing a medical examination to check for any injuries or harm. Detectives suspected that the perpetrator might have been injured during the struggle, but Clay showed no signs of injury on his hands. The investigators then examined their sons, 21-year-old Austin and 18-year-old Blake. The only issue that arose was the presence of old cuts on the older son's hands, but these were explained by his job at a window manufacturing plant. During conversations with the sons, some facts were established that would later become clearer. The children knew that after the divorce, their mother had been dating and they disapproved of it. They had seen explicit photos on their mother's laptop, leading them to wonder if she might have been targeted by an online predator. It was clear that the sons loved their mother and were deeply shaken by her death. However, they had disagreed with the changes she had been making in her life. In a subsequent interview, Clay expressed himself more clearly. He blamed Shannon's behavior for his family's problems while he was away on business, especially her frequent encounters with other men. Clay even suspected that Marshall might not be his biological son, but he loved him regardless. Clay believed that after their relationship ended, Shannon started to indulge excessively and not appropriately for her age. He disapproved of her dropping off the kids at his place when she went on dates. By this point, investigators had not only spoken to Clay and the children but also interviewed Shannon's relatives and friends. The detectives developed a more comprehensive understanding of the deceased and her family. Shannon had always dreamed of having a big, loving family. Growing up, she was a kind and modest person who loved to draw and was very good at it, winning many awards. At 20, she met 25-year-old Clay Starbuck in Florida, where she had moved with her family when she was young. Clay was on vacation from Alaska. They were introduced by friends at a party and hit it off right away. That night, Shannon learned a lot about Clay. He had gone to school in Colorado to learn about diesel mechanics and later worked on the Trans-Alaskan pipeline, which paid well. However, he was already married with 2 kids. Despite his complicated past, Shannon wasn't discouraged. She actually saw it as a plus, thinking it gave him valuable experience for their future together. Shannon and Clay got married soon after meeting. As Clay's new wife, she moved in with her husband. At first, she struggled to adjust to her new surroundings and the weather, but she quickly settled in. Shannon's married life wasn't as perfect as she had envisioned. Her husband Clay was often away, leaving her to manage the household by herself. However, her love for him gave her the strength to carry on, knowing that his work shifts would eventually end and he would return to her. In the meantime, she took on the role of mother to his children from his previous marriage and soon gave birth to their own son, Austin, followed by another son, Blake, 3 years later. In 1996, they welcomed a daughter, Logan, who was later diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Shannon accepted her daughter's diagnosis with love and care, becoming her closest companion. The family was later completed with the arrival of another daughter, Serena. Shannon devoted herself to her children's well-being, education, and spiritual growth. She was also known for her cooking, crafts, and other hobbies within their community. However, she was so focused on being a caring mother and a loving wife that she didn't realize her husband was having an affair at work. When she discovered his affair, she felt deeply betrayed and shocked. This led her to file for divorce in 2000, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She still had feelings for her ex-husband, so she moved to Arizona to start fresh and ease the pain of their separation. There, she attempted to start a new relationship, but it didn't work out because she realized she still loved her ex, Clay. Clay was also reaching out to her and asking her to come back, claiming he had changed. Believing him, she gave him another chance. In 2001, they had a son named Marshall, their 5th child. However, instead of strengthening their relationship, Marshall's birth created new tensions. Even when they formally remarried in 2006, their relationship remained strained. 6 months later, the family moved to Deer Park, Washington. Clay's work kept him away, leaving Shannon to care for the children and manage the household. She kept her family entertained by organizing outings and parties at home. However, the frequent time spent apart put a strain on her marriage, creating doubts and mistrust that eventually led to a permanent separation in 2010. Crossing into her 40s, Shannon started to rebuild her life with the hope of finding love again. She was determined not to give up or make the same mistakes as before. Even when her ex-husband Clay suffered a serious injury, Shannon chose not to go back to him. However, she still provided him with support and help. In February 2011, Clay quit his job and moved to Deer Park to be closer to his children and Shannon. Although he hoped Shannon would take him back, she didn't feel the same way. She had finally found freedom and was enjoying it. After Clay's surgery, Austin and Blake moved in with him, enjoying more independence from their mother. Shannon started a new chapter, finding a part-time job and enrolling in a dental assistant course to support her family since Clay stopped paying child support due to illness. The children stayed with Clay on Wednesdays and every other weekend. By summer's end, Shannon completed her certification and was ready for her next goal. Shannon Starbuck had been seeking a fresh start, creating a dating profile in hopes of meeting someone special and leaving her past heartache behind. She regretted spending her best years with a man who didn't appreciate her and was capable of deceit. Tragically, her dreams were cut short one December morning when she became Shannon of a heinous crime. Her funeral, held on December 10, 2011, was attended by a large number of people, a testament to her bright and sincere personality. she was laid to rest at a cemetery in Orlando. The investigation into her death was swift, thanks to public attention. Detectives focused on her ex-husband Clay, verifying his alibi for December 1st. His fingerprints didn't match those at the crime scene, so they checked his story against databases and examined Shannon's phone, laptop, and diary for other potential suspects. Detectives thoroughly examined Shannon's mobile phone, leading them to add several individuals to the list of suspects. These men had been in contact with her through a dating site, raising suspicions about their potential involvement. One suspect, Tom Walker, had arranged a date with Shannon for December 5th, just hours before her death. Their conversations had been candid, and they had exchanged photos. However, when Tom Walker requested that Shannon take a photo using an adult toy, she declined. Notably, her body was later discovered in the exact pose that Tom Walker had mentioned. Within an hour, detectives located Tom Walker, who was shocked not only by the news of Shannon's death but also by being considered a suspect. He promptly provided an explanation for his activities on the day of her death, which was corroborated by his colleagues and surveillance footage. The next individual on the list was John Wilson, who had scheduled a meeting with Shannon on December 1st. An examination of their correspondence revealed. The investigation revealed that the suitor, whose real name was John Kinlawn, had no intention of a serious relationship with Shannon and had used a fake identity. He was married and worked in a different field than he claimed, which explained his secretive behavior. When questioned, Kinlawn had an alibi for the time of the crime, which was corroborated, and he was released after providing a DNA sample. The investigation was back to square one, but a breakthrough came when detectives examined Shannon's mobile phone. They discovered that a 911 call had been made from the phone on the morning of December 1st, but it had been deleted from the call log. After retrieving the call, they found it contained only the sounds of sobbing and rustling before abruptly ending. Shannon's phone records revealed a failed call and 11 messages sent after her death. GPS data confirmed her phone was at home, where she was killed after dropping her kids at school. The suspect tried to mislead the investigation and was found to be close to the Shannon family, even using a nickname for the youngest son. After uncovering this information, Clay's statements were examined more closely. He had a clear motive for killing his ex-wife, as divorce can be difficult for some partners to accept. Additionally, he had the perfect opportunity, knowing her daily routine. As a result, authorities decided to track the suspect's car route again, this time using footage from street surveillance cameras. This is when the officers' suspicions became clearer. It turned out that Clay's car had not broken down. At the same time, results from another analysis arrived, showing that DNA material collected from Shannon's body matched the suspect's samples exactly. When Shannon returned home, a heated argument broke out, which ultimately led to her death. The unusual position of her body was a deliberate act of vengeance by Clay, who was enraged by her newfound freedom. After the murder, Clay stayed in the house and impersonated Shannon in text messages. It became clear that his intentions to harm her may have been long-standing. A friend's conversation with detectives took on new significance, revealing that Clay and Shannon's relationship was troubled. Shannon had confided in friends that she was tired of Clay's controlling behavior and criticism, and had feared he might harm her if she ever left him. In fact, Shannon had contacted the police multiple times between June and November 2011, reporting that Clay was stalking her and making her feel unsafe in her own home. She had become so fearful that she refused to give anyone a spare key to her house. Ultimately, Shannon secured a restraining order against Clay, limiting their communication to text messages. A thorough examination of her diary revealed that she not only feared her former lover but also believed he was manipulating their children against her. Clay had been spreading vicious rumors and portraying her as promiscuous. As a result, when he was arrested on February 6, 2012, the children refused to believe he was involved. The discovery of a tracking program on Channon's laptop, a hard drive labeled Channon's desktop computer in Clay's house, and printed correspondences did not seem to disturb them. The older children questioned the authenticity of the DNA analysis, thinking the accusations against their father were unbelievable and the case was fabricated. However, law enforcement and other relatives had a different perspective. At the trial, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of physical evidence and testimonies, confidently demonstrating Clay's guilt. In June 2013, justice was served when Clay Starbuck was found guilty of first-degree deprivation of life under aggravating circumstances and disrespect to human remains. He was sentenced to life without parole. His 2015 appeal was denied. He's serving time in Spokane County. Channon's family grieves her loss, but the children siding with their father hurts more. His obsession led to revenge, leaving the children without a mother or father. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a baby girl named Marie was born in the Philippines to an ordinary family. Concerned about her daughter's future, Marie's mother made the difficult decision to send her to the United States, where she believed Marie would have better opportunities for success. As a result, Marie was placed in a foster family with a military background, where she met a young girl named Esther, who was the same age as her. Two young girls quickly became close friends, unaware of a surprising fact that linked them together. What Marie didn't know was that her American foster father was actually her biological parent, making Esther her biological sister. As they grew older, the sisters left their parents' house and decided to start a new life together. They chose to settle in Florida, where they rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club that soon became their favorite hangout spot. Marie Carlson's life was a vibrant reflection of her favorite color, pink. She had always believed that living a beautiful life was essential, surrounding herself with flowers and lovely things. But everything changed when she met Jeff, and she discovered a new, profound meaning in life: love. They quickly fell for each other, got married, and had a daughter named Paris, a name that symbolized the love and beauty they shared. Despite their happy family life, Jeff remained an enigma. His past and last name were shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, Marie was driven to succeed in her career. She had set her sights on joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and was studying criminal law to achieve her goal. However, her journey was not without its challenges. As she progressed in her career, the obstacles grew tougher, and despite her best efforts, Marie ultimately left the police service without realizing her dream. Marie's life took a devastating turn due to a mental health disorder that worsened over time. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child left her with deep emotional scars. As a result, her daily life became increasingly painful, and her relationship with her husband, Jeff, began to suffer. The love they once shared started to fade, and their marriage eventually ended in divorce. The divorce was a difficult but necessary decision, as both Marie and Jeff knew they needed to prioritize their daughter, Paris. They agreed that it would be best for Paris to live with Jeff, allowing her to escape the negativity that had been affecting their home. Despite the challenges, they completed the necessary paperwork amicably and with minimal drama. Throughout the long and difficult divorce process, Marie and Jeff remained dedicated to making decisions that would benefit and care for their daughter, Paris. They remained on good terms and continued to care for each other as friends. Marie was grateful for Jeff's support and made it a priority to spend quality time with Paris, never missing a birthday. Marie had faced many challenges, but she remained determined and refused to surrender. Despite her struggles, she never lost hope. One day, she discovered what had been missing in her life: faith. This newfound faith led her to the Emerald Coast Church, founded by the charismatic pastor James Flanders and his wife Tanya. From the moment she stepped into the church, Marie felt a sense of belonging. The warm and welcoming atmosphere, combined with Pastor James Flanders' sincere and heartfelt sermons, made her feel at home. Marie began the process of recovering and healing from her past experiences, working to make amends and move forward. The Flanders, known for their kindness and generosity, had created a sanctuary where people could find help and support. For Marie, the church became more than just a place of worship. It was a loving community that accepted her with open arms. As she surrounded herself with the church's loving atmosphere, Marie began to heal and grow. With each passing day, Marie felt a sense of freedom and joy that she had never known before. She was no longer the lost and broken person she once was. Instead, she was a strong and vibrant individual, filled with hope and happiness. As she looked out at the sunny Florida landscape, Marie's eyes shone with a newfound radiance, reflecting the beauty and joy that had blossomed in her soul. The church was more than just a building. It was a community of people who genuinely cared for one another. For Marie, this small community became a second family, filled with love, light, and faith. From the outside, the church appeared ordinary, but inside, it felt like a warm and welcoming home. The people gathered there were united by their shared faith, and time seemed to stand still as they came together. Marie, however, was hiding a secret. She was pregnant, and the weight of this secret was crushing her. She felt ashamed and fearful, and only a few close people knew the truth. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. As the news spread through the quiet town, people began to wonder who the father of the child was. The truth was painful. The father was a man Marie had been dating briefly, but he had turned out to be abusive and hurtful. When Marie became pregnant, he disappeared without a word. Left alone and broken, Marie found solace in the church. The Flanders family and the local community showed Marie and her newborn daughter overwhelming kindness and acceptance. They provided a safe and nurturing environment, filling a vital need in Marie's life by becoming like a substitute family. Through their selfless support, Marie was able to find the courage, optimism, and start the healing process from the trauma of her past. Marie had been feeling trapped in her life, and just 3 months after giving birth to her daughter, she made a shocking decision that left everyone stunned. She posted a mysterious message on social media announcing that she was leaving, not just her city, but also her family and friends behind. Marie had been secretly planning her escape, careful not to reveal her intentions to anyone, fearing they would try to talk her out of it. She only hinted at her dreams and expressed her love for her loved ones, making it clear that she was leaving for good. Her departure left many questions unanswered. Where was she going? What path would she take? And would she achieve her dreams? Marie's loved ones were devastated, worried sick about her safety and unsure of what to do next. The uncertainty surrounding her disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was particularly frantic and decided to contact the police to help find her. As the days passed, the worry and fear for Marie's fate only intensified. Marie's sudden disappearance from Fort Walton Beach had barely stopped making headlines when a disturbing revelation emerged. She had left behind her 3-month-old daughter. This news sparked immediate concern from Marie's sister, Esther, who knew her siblings' devotion to her children. "This is out of character for her," Esther said, her voice shaking. "She's always been extremely protective of her kids." Those who knew Marie were shocked by her disappearance. As a mother, she had always been exemplary, particularly with her 7-year-old daughter, Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was especially stunned when he learned that she had stopped visiting Paris, as they had been inseparable. Now, at 37, Marie had vanished without a trace. While she had the right to start anew, the police couldn't ignore the fact that she had left her young child behind. The police analyzed Marie's recent messages and discovered a peculiar aspect: her writing style had changed significantly from before. This led them to suspect that she might be under duress or that the messages were fabricated. An investigation was launched, which soon impacted Marie's personal life. Questions arose about the identity of her daughter Grace's father and the nature of their relationship with Marie. However, even Marie's sister Esther was unable to confirm or deny these suspicions. The police were faced with a complex web of secrets surrounding Marie's disappearance, including the mysterious messages and the uncertainty about Grace's father. In an effort to clarify the situation, the police spoke with Tanya and James Flanders. They revealed that Marie had a history of disappearing temporarily without explanation. The Flanders also shared that Marie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which could have contributed to her erratic behavior. A few weeks before she vanished, Marie experienced a severe episode of depression. She began taking medication but was forced to stop due to her pregnancy. Feeling extremely unwell, Marie asked the Flanders family to care for her daughter while she rested. After lunch, Marie lay down to rest, and Tanya and Grace went out shopping. James stayed with Marie to keep an eye on her, but he left for a short time to go home. When he returned, he was shocked to find that Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders family immediately launched a search for Marie. They scoured the streets, checking the parking lots of every building, but found no sign of her. Then, James had an idea to check the airport, and to their astonishment, they found Marie's car parked there. Using the spare keys, James drove the car back home. When investigators examined the car, they did not find any suspicious marks or evidence that could lead to Marie's whereabouts. The investigators returned to the airport, hoping to find new leads. Their plan was to review the parking lot camera footage, as the airport is required to keep this information on file. They also hoped to find Marie's ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. However, when they found the ticket, it didn't yield any useful results. The ticket was clean, with no fingerprints or other clues that could aid in the investigation. A search of Marie's car also turned up nothing, and the parking ticket didn't contain any fingerprints. To make matters worse, the cameras in the parking lot weren't working on the day Marie disappeared. This lack of footage was a significant setback for the investigation, leaving the question of whether Marie's disappearance was a tragic accident or a carefully planned escape. As the investigation continued, the police began to suspect that Marie's disappearance might be more sinister than initially thought. They reclassified the case as a murder investigation and shifted their focus to the mysterious father of Marie's child, Grace. The police returned to the church, hoping to find some answers to their questions. Who was Grace's father, and what role did he play in Marie's disappearance? The church, where Marie had found solace, was filled with rumors and speculation. Parishioners whispered about Marie's secret and the plan that had been weighing on her mind. Marie had been struggling with depression and had considered an abortion, but the Flanders family, who were eager to expand their family, had strongly opposed this idea. The Flanders asked Marie to leave her baby with them, while hypocritically offering to help her. Unbeknownst to others, they desperately wanted a second child, despite both being over 40. One parishioner claimed that Marie's baby, Grace, was a reward from above for the Flanders' good deeds. The situation took a turn when Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, arrived on the scene. He was not the father of the child but had information that could solve the mystery. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie's pregnancy and had questioned her about the father. Marie lied, saying she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. However, the investigation that followed revealed the truth. Police spoke with Tanya's friends, who were also church members, and eventually, the truth came to light. It turned out that the father of the child was James, and the conception was natural. This meant that James's wife, Tanya, had to silently accept the situation. The revelation caught the investigators' attention, and the Flanders were summoned for questioning once again. Tanya was the only one who showed up for questioning. She confirmed the information and added that she was present when the child was conceived. According to her, everything happened with the mutual consent of all parties involved. After Marie disappeared, disturbing details about her relationship with James and Tanya came to light. It turned out that James was intimately involved with both women, which was not just infidelity but a form of polygamy. At one point, they even celebrated the child's birthday together, taking a photo of James, Tanya, and Marie posing as a happy family. However, this photo was meant to mislead, suggesting that the celebration was only for Tanya and that Marie was not involved. But after questioning Tanya's friends, the investigation uncovered new information that revealed the true nature of their relationship. Although Tanya claimed that Marie was initially happy with the arrangement, it became clear that this was no longer the case at some point. Marie's feelings for her daughter Grace were stirred after she was born, and she became hesitant to give her up to Tanya. According to friends, Marie's reservations fueled her jealousy of Tanya, sparking suspicion that Marie might not want to surrender her child to her rival and planned to steal James away from her. These rumors swiftly elevated Tanya to the top of the suspect list. Following Marie's disappearance, all Tanya's problems would essentially dissolve, granting her the opportunity to raise Grace solo and retain her status as James's beloved wife. However, 2 months had passed since Marie vanished, yet no leads emerged. Investigators diligently attempted to unravel the mysteries surrounding Marie's disappearance using available tools, including GPS data. Despite its limitations in 2011, investigators focused on analyzing phone records and message logs to gather more information. The records revealed that Marie had accompanied James to the airport, but Tanya was absent. This development coincided with the unexpected visit of Jason, a young priest who often represented James and ultimately chose to share information with investigators. Jason shared with others a conversation he had unintentionally overheard after Marie vanished. James expressed his distress and concern, stating that he would have to leave the country due to Marie's disappearance, but he couldn't disclose the details. He only mentioned that something terrible had occurred during Marie's severe depression. Prior to her disappearance, James had stayed with Marie at a clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily took his place. Meanwhile, rumors about polygamy began circulating among the church parishioners, which shocked Jason when he discovered them. Upon James' return from the hospital, Jason decided to discuss the matter with him. Jason asked James about his relationship with Marie. James was honest and admitted to having a romantic relationship with both Marie and his wife. He revealed that he and Marie had a heated argument before her disappearance, which escalated into a physical fight. However, James insisted that Marie was alive and well at the time of her disappearance. Following their conversation, James decided to resign as pastor and soon left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Shortly before their departure, Marie's family had contacted the Flanders family to collect some of Marie's belongings. As a result, investigators obtained Marie's phone, which may have contained crucial information. The investigation into Marie's disappearance was initially hindered because most of the data on James' phone had been deleted. However, investigators were able to recover some fragments, including a video of James promoting precious metals. This finding raised suspicions, particularly since the case took place in 2011, when digital evidence was easier to erase and surveillance was less widespread. At that time, DNA detection technologies were still in their infancy, making it seem like criminals could easily escape punishment. However, the field of digital forensics was also advancing, and it was this expertise that ultimately helped crack the case. 3 years after Marie vanished, a new program became available that enabled investigators to recover data from phones and computers. This technology allowed them to access messages between Marie and James, which painted a disturbing picture of their relationship. The recovered messages included explicit images, some of which were taken inside a church. Perhaps most damningly, Marie's emails to James revealed her deep desire to leave Fort Walton Beach, fearing the place was cursed. Her messages hinted at her desperation to escape with her child. A chain of unexpected and dramatic events led to the Flanders family's deepest secrets being exposed. Flanders said, "When someone spreads rumors or harms me, I want them to cease to exist." Given James' situation, shrouded in darkness and fear, it's possible he fulfilled this ominous promise. Despite the lack of Marie's body, there was sufficient evidence to issue an arrest warrant for James on charges of second-degree murder. However, the prosecutor faced a significant challenge, convincing the jury of James' guilt without the victim's body. James and his lawyer were in a desperate situation with an uncertain future ahead, so they made a drastic decision as a last resort to try and turn things around. If James revealed Marie's body's location, he would be charged with manslaughter, a crime with a more moderate sentence. After years of anguish, Marie's family agreed to this deal. James's words revealed a disturbing truth. He and Marie had a tumultuous relationship, frequently arguing about her struggles with depression. During one heated argument, Marie physically lashed out at James, and in an attempt to calm her down, he inadvertently knocked her to the ground. Tragically, she lost her life. In the aftermath, James was overcome with guilt and regret. He had unknowingly contributed to Marie's death, and his attempts to revive her were unsuccessful. The investigators eventually discovered Marie's body in the yard of James's house, buried 5 feet underground and wrapped in a blanket. The discovery was a shock to everyone involved, as they had been searching for her for years. The consequences of James's actions were severe. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, claimed to have been unaware of James's crime and was deeply shocked by the news of Marie's death. Marie's body was discovered after a delay, which hindered experts from determining the cause of her death. This delayed discovery may have impacted the direction of the investigation. 5 years later, Marie's family and friends were finally able to lay her to rest and find closure at her funeral. Her sister Esther might have even sung a final song in her honor. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jorge Cortez. Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was born on January 5, 1978, in Mexico City. He kept his childhood and teenage years private, only sharing that he often clashed with his mother, who cared deeply for him, and his father, who rarely intervened in their arguments. Jorge's strained family relationships likely contributed to his emotional isolation and the development of his aggressive and unstable personality. To escape his difficult home life, Jorge left at a young age and embarked on a journey across Mexico, taking on temporary jobs to support himself. He worked as a waiter in various bars in Mexico City, including those in the Rosa and Cona districts, and also relied on tips from tourists in the popular Villa Du and Cuac districts, known for their extensive infrastructure and diverse entertainment options. Jorge's life of crime began in this place. In 2010, he was arrested for theft and given a 4-year prison sentence. However, because it was his first offense, the judge decided to release him on bail. At the time, no one suspected that this decision would set free a man who would later become one of Mexico's most notorious criminals. After his release, Jorge met a girl named Adriana and fell in love. Initially, he treated her with kindness and attention, but as their relationship deepened, his behavior became increasingly violent. Adriana soon found herself a victim of his physical abuse. Exhausted by his cruelty, she decided to end the relationship, but Jorge refused to accept her decision. One night, Jorge violently attacked Adriana, dragging her down the stairs by her hair and breaking her nose. He beat her so severely that she lost consciousness. When she came to, she saw Jorge holding a lighter and threatening to kill them both if she didn't stay with him. Despite his threats, Adriana continued to resist, which further enraged Jorge. He attempted to strangle her by grabbing her neck with both hands. However, Adriana managed to break free, grabbed a hammer, and began fighting back. She was able to force Jorge out of the apartment and ultimately out of her life for good. This violent confrontation occurred in 2011, and although Adriana reported the incident to the police, Jorge was released on bail and avoided punishment. In hindsight, Adriana's escape from Jorge that night saved her from a potentially deadly situation. Jorge would go on to take the lives of multiple women in the future. After meeting Jorge, 18-year-old Yang Kiang Marie became his new victim. Yang was a Korean girl who was very close to her mother, Monica, and her sisters, particularly Anna. Anna was a lively and athletic young woman who balanced her studies in psychology with a part-time job at a restaurant. Yang met Jorge at one of the bars where he worked, and they were immediately drawn to each other. After a brief courtship, they started dating, but their relationship was marked by violence. Despite their frequent arguments, they stayed together. When Yang turned 19, she decided to declare her independence from her family and move to the city with Jorge. However, this change only made their problems worse. Jorge's behavior became increasingly controlling and abusive. He constantly monitored Yang's activities, calling her every hour at work and restricting her interactions with friends. As a result, Yang felt trapped and realized she was a victim of domestic violence. However, she hid the truth from others, including her family, to avoid causing them concern. Only a few close people, including her sister Anna and some friends, knew about the situation. Despite her family's warnings and advice to leave Jorge, Yang struggled to break free. She attempted to leave him multiple times but always returned, held back by her own fears and vulnerabilities. During this time, Yang underwent a significant transformation, changing from a happy and lively person to someone who was depressed and willing to do anything to please Jorge. The relationship continued to deteriorate, becoming increasingly toxic and damaging to Yang's well-being. Yang's relationship with Jorge was marked by violent outbursts. On one occasion, Jorge refused to let Yang into their apartment when she came home late. On another, he locked her inside, set her clothes on fire, and chased her around the room in a fit of rage. In August 2014, their arguments escalated, and Yang decided to leave Jorge and move in with her parents. A friend encouraged her to report Jorge to the police and end the abuse. Although Yang initially agreed, she eventually returned to Jorge and they continued living together. Tragically, Yang's life was cut short. On September 21st, her body was discovered in their apartment, bearing signs of severe bruising. Jorge claimed to have found Yang hanging in the bedroom, stating that he had left her sleeping at noon the previous day, September 20th, after she had worked a shift at the bar. Jorge claimed that he returned home on the morning of September 21st to find Yang deceased. He immediately contacted the police and notified Yang's family of the tragic event. The news of Yang's death was devastating to her family, prompting Monica and Anna to rush to the scene. Upon arrival, they found police officers and forensic experts already at the apartment, carefully removing Yang's body from the bed. Jorge stated that when he saw his deceased wife, he became frantic and attempted to assist her. A police officer explained to the family that an investigation was ongoing and they needed to stay outside the house to protect potential evidence. As they watched, Yang's body, covered with a sheet, was carried out of the house. The police also informed them that the initial evidence suggested Yang's death was a suicide, a conclusion supported by the position of the body in Jorge's account, which the police believed to be truthful. However, Yang's family was skeptical and struggled to accept this explanation, finding it hard to believe that she would take her own life. When the family arrived to identify the body and prepare the necessary documents, they were surprised to find that the examination protocol was almost complete. The death certificate stated that Yang had died from strangulation by hanging. However, when the relatives were allowed to view the body, they noticed bruises on Yang's legs that seemed suspicious. Jorge attempted to explain the bruises by saying that the body had slipped from his hands and fallen to the floor when he tried to move it from the bed. Monica was not convinced by Jorge's explanation and suspected that something was not quite right. Investigations revealed more about Yang's tumultuous relationship with Jorge, fueling suspicion that her death might not be the suicide police claimed. During police testimony, friends described constant fighting between they, revealing Jorge's history of jealousy and aggression. His behavior extended to frequent phone calls to Yang's workplace, indicating a pattern of controlling behavior. Yang's sister Anna noted that a few months before the tragedy, her behavior dramatically shifted. Anna added that she started distancing herself from the family once the relationship with Jorge started. This prompted concern within the family. Despite growing concerns about Jorge's unstable behavior and doubts about the official explanation, the police were quick to dismiss theories and rushed to close the case. Experts at the Katok morgue recommended cremating Yang's body, which meant that further forensic investigation would not be possible. Yang's mother was deeply suspicious of Jorge's involvement in her daughter's death, but she eventually agreed to the cremation due to pressure from her family, thereby giving up the chance to gather evidence to support her suspicions. Jorge did not attend the funeral, but he got a tattoo of a broken heart, supposedly to show his grief. However, he also cut off all contact with Yang's family. Yang's death had a devastating impact on her family, especially her mother, Monica. The overwhelming pain of losing her daughter, combined with feelings of loneliness and despair, led Monica to develop an addiction to alcohol and smoking. Monica was devastated when her daughter Yang passed away suddenly. Despite her overwhelming grief, Monica refused to accept the initial explanation of Yang's death, finding it contradictory to her daughter's outgoing and life-loving nature. Unsettled by details like the bruises on Yang's body and the lack of evidence supporting the claimed manner of death, Monica's instincts told her there was more to the story. To get answers, Monica launched her own investigation into the case. Monica acquired security footage from her daughter's home, revealing her son-in-law Jorge was the last person to see Yang alive. With the help of a private attorney and forensic pathologist, Monica reviewed Yang's final days. An unexpected development led to a shocking explanation, revealing a deeply seated scandal and a misclassified homicide. Monica's determination uncovered hidden details, ultimately revealing the truth behind Yang's death. The detective completely rejected the initial account of Yang's death, presenting conclusive evidence that proved she was murdered. Further investigation revealed several discrepancies with the original autopsy. There were no signs of hanging on Yang's body, but her neck showed signs of strangulation, and a scarf had been used to make it appear as though she had hanged herself. Bruises on her hands and fingernails suggested she had tried to fight back. The medical examiner confirmed that any competent expert would have reached the same conclusion. This raises serious questions. Why did the police ignore these facts, and why did the family receive a false report about their daughter's death? Monica's relentless pursuit of truth led her to conduct a 7-month investigation, uncovering a series of disturbing failures and incompetence by law enforcement agencies. Her research revealed that Yang had previously reported violence by Jorge to the police, but her cries for help were ignored. Monica also discovered that Jorge had ties to his father and the staff handling the case, which, combined with the severity of Yang's injuries and the apparent negligence of the authorities, compelled her to take decisive action. Monica appealed to the prosecutor's office, seeking a review of the case and justice for Jorge, the main suspect. However, she was met with neglect and cynicism instead of support. A prosecutor even questioned her competence, suggesting she should focus on being a housewife and seek psychological help rather than pursuing justice. Undeterred, Monica continued her investigation, driven by her love for her child and her desire for truth. her perseverance ultimately paid off. Jorge committed another murder in 2016, a devastating end to Yang's story. This event began a new chapter in Campira's life. She met Jorge online, where he hid his dark nature behind a charming facade. Unaware of his past, she was drawn to his friendly, sociable personality, and they soon developed a romantic relationship. Campira's close friends discovered her new relationship when she posted a photo of herself and her boyfriend on social media, beaming with happiness. For several weeks, their romance seemed perfect. As 2016 drew to a close, Campira's mother, Margarita, met Jorge for the first time on December 28. Campira, Jorge, and her children then traveled to Acapulco to spend the New Year's holidays with her parents. However, Jorge later convinced Campira to extend their stay, and she asked her mother to watch the children for a few more days. Margarita agreed, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. 3 days later, Campira was found dead. The last time Margarita had spoken to her daughter was on December 30th. When Margarita tried to call Campira on New Year's Eve, she was met with silence. Campira always answered her phone or returned calls promptly, so Margarita's anxiety grew with each passing minute. As the hours ticked by, Campira's unusual silence and lack of online activity only heightened Margarita's concerns. Eventually, Margarita decided to contact Jorge to find out what had happened to her daughter. Jorge attempted to alleviate Margarita's concerns by downplaying the argument and Campira departure to celebrate the new year with friends. However, Margarita remained unconvinced and asked a family friend to check on Campira. When the friend arrived at Campira's house, Jorge told him that Campira was asleep and unable to meet with him. Margarita's suspicions grew, and she sensed that Jorge was hiding something. On December 31st, between 5 o'clock and 8 p.m., Jorge committed a heinous crime. He brutally murdered Campira by strangling her after beating her severely with an unknown object, leaving multiple injuries on her face and body. In an attempt to make it appear as though Campira had taken her own life, Jorge cut a lock of her hair, placed her body on the bed, covered it with a blanket, and left the gas stove on. He even placed a portrait of Campira's late ex-husband in her hand to create the illusion that memories of him had driven her to suicide. Around 8:30 p.m., Jorge packed his belongings and left the house. On the night of January 1, 2017, Margarita tried to contact her daughter Campira to wish her a happy new year, but was unable to reach her. She then called her son Gabriel, who was in the same city as Campira, and asked him to check on her. When Gabriel arrived at his sister's house, he was immediately hit with a strong smell of gas. After turning off the gas burners, he began searching for Campira and was shocked to find her body on the couch, bearing signs of a brutal beating on her face. As Gabriel threw off the blanket covering his sister's body, he was horrified by what he saw. Campira was wearing only her underwear, and her body was covered in numerous bruises. Several details caught his attention. There were drops of blood around her, although her body in underwear appeared clean, as if she had recently bathed. Additionally, Campira's head was almost completely shaved, which struck Gabriel as strange, as his sister was known to take great care of her hair. Gabriel reported the incident to the police and then called his mother to break the news to Margarita. Paramedics and police arrived, confirmed Campira's death, and restricted access to the scene. The family was stunned by grief, struggling to come to terms with what happened. Their eyes reflected sadness and a glimmer of hope for justice. The investigation was complicated by inconsistencies between the crime scene and the initial assumption of suicide. The police meticulously examined every detail to unravel the truth. The police initially suspected suicide, but Campira's family disputed this, finding it impossible to believe that a young, cheerful woman would take such a drastic step. Campira's family was convinced that her death was not a suicide, but a violent crime. A strand of hair found on her body that did not match anyone in the house reinforced their suspicions. They demanded a more thorough investigation, which was granted. A second forensic examination confirmed their fears, revealing that Campira was strangled and that the suicide scene was staged. The evidence included marks on her trachea and neck, bruises indicating a beating, and the absence of a strand of hair. The police launched an investigation, and Campira's aunt, Sandra, worked with the deputy prosecutor to have the case transferred to the prosecutor's office. However, progress was slow. Later, Sandra was called back to the prosecutor's office and informed that she and her brother, Gabriel, could be plaintiffs in the case. Campira's children were left with their grandmother after the tragedy. To shield them from painful memories, they were transferred to a new school. However, time alone didn't heal their wounds. 2 months later, the family was allowed to visit the apartment where Campira's body was found, collecting her belongings and possibly uncovering clues. Her laptop was found, but its data had been deleted. Fortunately, her iPad was password protected, and the last photos she took before her death were recovered. One disturbing photo showed Campira lying next to Jorge on the same sofa where her body was later found. Further investigation of the photos revealed more evidence. In one image, Jorge was seen holding a skull-shaped container that was later discovered in the apartment's freezer. He was also shown strangling Campira with one hand. Drawers in the desk yielded sketches of tattoos Jorge planned to get, further hinting at his possible involvement in the crime. The public was outraged when Jorge was released on bail in 2009, sparking widespread anger. Many realized that if he had been detained earlier, the young women might still be alive. The Campira and Young families continued to demand justice for their loved ones on social media, gathering over 13,000 supporters on a memorial page. 10 months after his escape, Jorge was finally caught on October 24, 2017. His arrest was unexpected, occurring during a routine patrol by the National Civilian Police in Livingston, Guatemala. The officers were patrolling the streets when they noticed a suspicious man who appeared to be homeless. A routine check of his documents and fingerprints revealed a shocking truth: the man was on the international wanted list with a high danger level. Jorge was immediately arrested and taken to the immigration center in Guatemala City, where he was detained pending further action. The Guatemalan authorities quickly contacted their Mexican counterparts to initiate the extradition process. According to the head of the Guatemalan police, Pablo Castillo, Jorge had been hiding under a bridge in western Guatemala, living on the streets and relying on the kindness of tourists for survival. The next day, October 25, Jorge was transported to the Mexican border city of Chicas, where he was handed over to the Mexican authorities. After crossing the border, Jorge was taken to Mexico City, marking the successful completion of the extradition process and the delivery of justice. Jorge appeared in court to face charges for his alleged crimes. A reporter managed to ask him a few questions, but Jorge responded with a complete denial of any wrongdoing, claiming he was unaware of the charges against him. This was despite being taken to court on October 26 for a preventive measure, specifically for the murder of Campira. During the trial, the prosecution presented strong evidence of Jorge's involvement in the crime. The investigation revealed that Jorge had brutally beaten the victim with an unknown object before strangling her to death. The prosecutor classified the crime as a feminicide, made worse by the fact that Jorge had a romantic relationship with the victim. The prosecutor also pointed out that Jorge had a prior conviction for theft and was possibly involved in the death of another ex-girlfriend, Jan. Despite the overwhelming evidence and arguments against Jorge, his lawyer proposed an alternative explanation that Jorge was mentally unstable and needed a psychological evaluation. This move came as the community awaited justice, expecting a suitable punishment for the perpetrator. After thoroughly examining the evidence, witness testimonies, and arguments, the judge turned his attention to Jorge and his lawyer. He asked how long it would take to complete the psychological evaluation. Following a consultation, Jorge's lawyer agreed that Jorge would attend all subsequent court hearings. Upon reviewing all materials and considering both sides, the judge rendered a verdict. There was sufficient evidence from the prosecutor to hold Jorge accountable for his crimes. The court ordered the investigation to continue and gave a 4-month deadline to gather new evidence. Meanwhile, Jorge was taken into custody and held at a pre-trial detention center. Despite Jorge's arrest and guilty verdict, the Campira and Jan families faced a lengthy and challenging process ahead. In August 2019, an oral hearing was held in Jorge's case. His lawyer asked the court to disregard the videos that showed Jorge entering and leaving Campira's house on the day she was murdered. They claimed that these videos were incomplete, taken from a 30-hour recording at the crime scene, and could not be used to prove Jorge's guilt. The videos had been given to the victim's family by a neighbor who recorded them. The family then passed them on to the police, who brought only partial recordings to court. The police had lost the original disc. Jorge's lawyer alleged that the Mexico City prosecutor's office had concealed this information, which only came to light on the day of the hearing. The defense lawyer argued that the materials used to obtain the arrest warrant were unlawful. Specifically, the lawyer claimed that a key video was given to the Campira family rather than the judicial authorities, and therefore could not be used as evidence. Despite this, the supervisory judge rejected the defense's petition after considering the prosecution's arguments and the testimony of Campira's friends and neighbors. Additionally, the court considered 2 witness statements, but did not accept them as evidence. The case proceeded, and Jorge was allowed to appeal the decision and present the same arguments again. Meanwhile, the Young family was dealing with their own separate case. A ban on violence against women was established in Mexico City, thanks in part to advocacy from several groups, including the Mexican Institute of Human Rights and Democracy and the Center for Justice. This new decree was influenced by multiple high-profile crimes, including the murder of Jan. As a result, her case was forwarded to a Mexico City court for trial. Nearly 7 years after Yang's murder, charges were formally brought against her suspected killer, Jorge, in May 2021. Shortly thereafter, a judge ordered his arrest for his role in her murder. Despite these developments, Jorge's defense team was able to significantly slow down the investigation and prosecution. 9 years after Yang's death, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was sentenced to 52 years and 6 months in prison in November 2023 for taking Yang's life. While the Young family has finally received justice, Campira's family still faces a lengthy process. A trial had been scheduled for April 2022 at the detention center where Jorge was being held. Activists were resolute that this time the perpetrator would not evade accountability. Jorge's lawyers have successfully delayed the hearing once again, which was set to take place on January 29, 2024. Over 50 witnesses were expected to be called to testify, but for now, there is no update on the status of the hearing in the media. Jorge's family remains hopeful that he will eventually be held accountable for his actions. While nothing can bring Campira back, they seek justice and want to ensure that her death does not go unpunished. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grace Holland. Grace Holland was born on September 23, 1984, in the small town of Creve Coeur, Missouri. She grew up in a close-knit family with her parents and 2 sisters, including her twin, Laura. Together, they explored the world, played, studied, and dreamed of the future. Grace's education at a Catholic school instilled in her a sense of discipline, and her degree in criminal justice further fueled her interest in law and order. From a young age, Grace was a purposeful and responsible individual. She was drawn to the idea of helping others and upholding the law. After graduating from university, Grace got married and had 4 children, who became the center of her life. She devoted herself to caring for them, teaching them new things, and sharing her love for the world. As a proud mother, Grace often shared photos of her children with those around her and cherished every moment spent with them. However, in 2015, Grace's life took a dramatic turn. She met Robert Deas, the head of the Maryland County Fire Department. His courageous profession and heroic image immediately caught her attention. Robert and Grace were swept up in a whirlwind of emotions. He was captivated by her beauty, intelligence, and kindness, while she admired his strength, determination, and passion for helping others. However, a dark secret lurked behind Robert's impeccable reputation. His brother, David, a former St. Louis police officer, had been charged with a serious crime in 1998. Nearly 2 decades later, David passed away, leaving behind unanswered questions and secrets. David's influence had a profound impact on Robert's life and career. As a respected police officer, David had opened doors for Robert in law enforcement, helping him advance in his career. Robert also served in a fire department and held the position of deputy president at the family company, Liberty Arts Works. The company specialized in creating memorials for fallen military personnel, firefighters, and police officers. Through his work and involvement with the Backstopper organization, which supported first responders, Robert forged strong connections in his professional network. Robert had a child from his first marriage, but the relationship ultimately ended in divorce. He then married Grace, a detective from the Maryland Police, in an effort to find happiness again. This union strengthened his ties to law enforcement, and he and Grace built a life together, buying a new home and starting fresh. However, their seemingly perfect relationship soon began to unravel, revealing underlying issues. Robert's past continued to haunt him. His brother had been accused of a crime, tarnishing Robert's reputation and casting doubt on his integrity. Furthermore, cracks began to appear in his relationship with Grace. Despite their outward success, their relationship was marked by turmoil, with periods of calm punctuated by intense arguments. According to Laura, Grace's twin sister, Robert exerted significant control over Grace's life, dictating her spending habits, social interactions, and even her relationships. Laura revealed that Grace's best friend ended their relationship after a dinner with Robert, but the reason for the breakup was unclear. This development only increased Grace's feelings of isolation from her loved ones. Grace claimed that Robert forced her to quit her job and join the family business, although there was no official record of her employment. The family alleged that Robert simply instructed the company to pay her without documenting it. During this challenging time, Grace discovered she was pregnant with Robert's child. However, instead of bringing them closer together, the pregnancy increased the tension in their relationship. Their text messages, presented at the trial, revealed their conflicting desires. Grace wanted to keep the child and repair their relationship, while Robert was ready to end things. Court documents provided by the Holland family were shocking. Robert offered to pay Grace $1,600 to have an abortion, wanting to get rid of the child. However, an unexpected event occurred in the summer of 2020 in Missouri, the tragic death of 35-year-old Grace Holland. The suspicious circumstances surrounding Grace's death have left her family and the people of St. Louis determined to investigate further. As the government remained silent, distrust of the official story grew. Grace's mother faces accusations, which only strengthens the family's resolve to uncover the truth. The investigation started slowly at first, but after a lawsuit was filed and evidence was found, the case gained momentum, crossing state lines and captivating the entire country. Public opinion demands a fair verdict. On October 29, 2021, Laura Holland, Grace's sister, posted a heartbreaking letter on the police department's Facebook page. In it, she revealed that Grace had been living in fear of her husband Robert's aggressive behavior and had sought help from the Maryland Fire Department on June 24, 2020. Grace had secretly recorded one of their arguments, which later became evidence of their abusive relationship. On the recording, Robert can be heard insulting Grace, saying he didn't want to be with her. Robert was furious with Grace, accusing her of being lazy while he worked hard. In an attempt to calm him down, Grace confessed her love for him, but this only made Robert angrier. He eventually left her, leaving Grace alone with feelings of bitter loneliness and deep emotional pain. However, the situation seemed to have taken a turn for the better by July 21st. At around 10 p.m., Robert and Grace took a photo together, lying on their bed in their new home. Both of them were smiling, and it seemed like they were trying to put their argument behind them. But this moment of peace was short-lived. 2 days later, on July 23, 2020, at 11:53 p.m., Robert called the emergency services, sobbing uncontrollably as he reported that his fiancée had shot herself. Paramedics rushed into the house to find Grace lifeless on the floor. The cause of her death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the head, resulting in instant death. However, the results of the autopsy, released on September 17, 2020, reveal the surprising level of detail. According to the report, the bullet that killed Grace was fired from a gun she was holding in her right hand. The bullet pierced her left temple, deviated from the center line to the right, and lodged in the occipital lobe of her skull. The unusual trajectory of the bullet raised questions among experts about the official story. The Holland family stated that the detective spoke briefly with Robert at the crime scene. Robert reportedly told the police that Grace was struggling with depression following a recent miscarriage, their second. He claimed that he was in the living room when Grace emerged from the bedroom to hug him, but soon returned to the bedroom. He said he heard a shot and found Grace in the bedroom with a gun and blood under her head. The detective submitted a report to the medical examiner at 7:25 a.m. However, the Holland family disputed this, claiming that Robert visited the police station with his lawyer on the same day. Robert gave a written statement that contradicted the report. In his new version of events, Robert stated that he and Grace were in the bedroom together before she left for work. According to Robert, Grace returned to hug him, brought her face close to his, said goodbye, and then a shot occurred. A published press release on January 31, 2024, raised questions about a missing recording of an interview between Robert and a detective from the police department during the investigation. Jeffrey Hartman, the police chief, confirmed the existence of the video interview to a TV channel in 2021. Hartman reported that an error in the department's recording system led to the deletion of the record, leaving many questions unanswered. The police investigated Grace's death on August 4, 2020, and suggested she had been depressed, implying her death was expected. Analyzing Robert's phone data, detectives concluded it was a suicide based on forensic results. However, the Holland family doubted the police's findings and hired a private detective, believing Robert was responsible for her death. Laura, Grace's sister, shared her concerns about the investigation online, detailing the evidence and facts that suggested the police had gotten it wrong. The Holland family expressed their disappointment and frustration with the police, who had never considered Robert a suspect despite the numerous clues pointing to his involvement. The family also criticized the investigators for not conducting thorough tests, such as checking Robert's and Grace's hands for gunpowder residue and examining Robert's clothes for evidence. Furthermore, the police department had lost several crucial videos that could have shed light on Robert's role in the incident. The Holland family expressed concerns about potential police bias against Robert, citing his unusual behavior after Grace's death. Robert showed no concern for Grace's well-being. The family also pointed out that Robert knew some people involved in the investigation, which they believed may have influenced the case. The family claimed that obvious signs of domestic violence were ignored. After their requests for a more thorough investigation were met with no response, the Hollands took their case to court in 2023. They filed a lawsuit against Robert, accusing him of physical abuse and suggesting that he was either directly responsible for Grace's death. Robert's lawyer maintained his client's innocence, acknowledging some facts but denying any involvement in Grace's death. He suggested that the family's emotional distress may have led them to misinterpret events and wrongly accuse Robert. In December 2023, Hartman of the police department requested that the St. Louis County Police Department review the case of Grace. The county police department agreed to review the case and began examining the details in January 2024. During this time, police officers visited the home of Robert to provide medical assistance to his new girlfriend, Dr. Sarah Sweeney. The incident is being treated as a sudden death, but the exact cause is still under investigation. Detectives are waiting for the results of a toxicology report, which may take 4 to 6 weeks to complete. Dr. Sweeney had previously spoken about her struggles with serious illnesses, including bone disease and allergies, for which she was hospitalized in 2021. Her condition could have led to severe allergic reactions, including life-threatening anaphylactic shock, if left untreated. However, her family reported that she always carried an adrenaline shot to manage her allergies and kept her condition under control. They are choosing to wait for the official autopsy results before drawing any conclusions. Robert remains a suspect in the eyes of the law, despite not being charged in connection with the deaths of Holland and Sweeney. The outcome of the Sweeney autopsy may significantly impact the investigation into Grace Holland's death. Following a thorough re-examination, the St. Louis County Police have ruled out the possibility that Grace took her own life. The investigation's findings were submitted to the prosecutor's office in early December, and the case is currently being treated as a death by negligence. The case remains open, and the prosecutor's office may take further action once all the facts are known. Police Chief Jeffrey Hartman has reaffirmed the department's initial conclusion, despite growing doubts and public scrutiny. Meanwhile, the families of Holland and Sweeney continue to push for the release of autopsy and toxicology results, seeking clarity on whether Grace Holland's death was a tragic accident or if there are underlying circumstances that have yet to be uncovered.